Thank you. Welcome everyone. Welcome our MPO folks to our home here at PSTA. We are delighted and looking forward to our discussion today. We're going to start with our introductions, and we're going to start, because it's home court, we'll start with PSTA. And my name is Darden Rice. I'm representing the PSTA board as our chair today, and glad to be here. I'm also a city council member from St. Petersburg. Patty, we'll start with you and go around, and we'll come back and we'll do our MPO introductions. And I'm also on the MPO.
Patty Johnson, PSTA board member, and I'm also a council person for Pinterest Park.
PSTA board. We'll just go around. Oh, I forgot yours.
You made it sound like PSTA home court. Good morning, everyone. Doreen Guido, MPO, and City of Clearwater.
Dave Eggers, Pinellas County Commissioner on the MPO and PSTA.
Mark Jackson, Resident Commissioner, representing Big C.
Julie Robichowski, Mayor of the Great City of Phoenix.
Alan Zimmer, PSA. Welcome everyone, I'm Brad Miller, PSBA CEO.
Hello everybody, I'm Whit Blanton, Executive Director of the Pinellas Planning Council at MPO.
Hi, I'm Lisa Wheeler Brown, City Council member for the City of St. Petersburg, and I am on the PSTA board.
Good morning, Ken Welch, County Commission, PSTA.
Morning, John Targa, Dunedin City Commission, MPO, PPC.
Morning, I'm Brian Scott, PSTA board, also on the MPO's board for the local coordinating board for communications.
John Maroney, Pinellas County Commissioner, member of the MPO and
Commissioner Safety Harbor, also representing Carver Springs and Oldsmar, and I'm the PSTA.
I'm Pinellas County Commissioner Janet Long and a board member for PSTA.
I am Cookie Kennedy. I am a commissioner in the city of Indian Rocks Beach, and I represent all of your beautiful beaches, 10 of them, and I'm also a member of the MPO.
Good morning, I'm Bill Johnson, council member from the City of Clearwater, PSTA board.
Good morning, I'm Jim Kennedy. I'm chair of the MPO, PPC, and on the St. Petersburg City Council.
I am Becky Bird, County Commissioner, PSTA board member.
PSTA board member, thank you.
Okay, we're going to get started with the next part of the agenda, which Chairman Kennedy and I will go over the meeting objectives and talk a little bit about PSTA and MPO. I think today's a really exciting day. Each and every one of us in this room has different roles and responsibilities, but we're all transportation and transit leaders for this county. And the way that we frame and discuss these issues sets an important tone for how people value our work. Real quick, PSTA by the numbers. We have about 210 buses, 40 routes, almost 5,000 stops. We have about an $86 million budget. 66 million is capital, and 20 million is operating. We're a strong economic development partner in the region. Our mission statement is about providing the best service possible to get people to their jobs, to events, to schools, to medical centers, and we take that job very seriously. We know that demographics are very important, and in this community, baby boomers want to age in place, and millennials, at a rate that even surprises me, are not only eschewing cars, many of them aren't even getting driver's licenses. So what that means is that our community has to have robust transit to offer people who want to stay here and who are comparing us with other areas that do have strong transit. At the street level, PSTA focuses on customer experience. We deal with equity issues in a daily way, from how we structure our fares to how we design our routes. Like many government agencies, we're constantly weighing our capital investment priorities, balancing the expansion of new services with taking care of our existing assets. Now, even in the largest cities known for world-class transit, fare box recovery doesn't pay for everything. So we are not relying on fare box recovery alone. We get about $50 million of our budget from the fare box. About $33 million comes from ad valorem, and the rest comes from other assortment of state and federal grants. And that's what makes it so critical for us to work in partnership with our MPO, with our commissioners, with our state leaders. It's because we can't always do it alone. We need help and support from everybody. So we're here in a spirit of partnership and working together, and to really explore the alignment of the goals that we share with the MPO. PSA today has, I think, really stepped out of the shadow of the failure of the green light referendum. We've learned a lot from that. We've learned a lot of what we did well. We learned a lot of what we certainly could have done better. But the real failure is if we don't learn from those lessons. So I think that the PSTA today that you'll hear about and our plans and our path forward, you're going to hear in greater detail from Brad Miller and other board members, is very exciting, the chart we have ahead of us. And I, for one, am very excited about the next year or so working with PSTA and MPO.
Good morning, everybody. On behalf of the PPC MPO, we're eager to have this discussion and continue building on a strong partnership. An effective collaborative working relationship between PSTA and the PPC MPO is essential to our overall success as a county and in our individual communities. From the Pinellas Planning Council perspective, it is critical that we coordinate the transit service so it efficiently services the various areas of our county that we anticipate to redevelop as shown on our county-wide plan map and as proposed by local governments. From an MPO perspective, our effectiveness in reducing traffic congestion, improving safety, and increasing accessibility for everyone depends on productivity of a multimodal transportation system. A convenient and reliable transit network is a key part of that system. Transit should be an increasingly viable option for a growing number of residents, employees, and visitors, not only here in Pinellas County, but throughout the Tampa Bay region. It is essential for strengthening our economy and giving an opportunity to our workforce and residents of all ages and abilities. And I just think it's a real good concept that we're starting to actually discuss. We see one another maybe on different boards that one or two members may be on, but to have our boards sit down face to face and understand each of our challenges and each of our goals and how we can move our county and area forward, I think is a great opportunity. So with that, I'll turn it over to Whit and we'll begin.
All right, thank you. Well, good morning, everybody. And I'm probably just going to start standing because I figure I'll be standing for most of this meeting. It's really great to be here, and this is, I think, a really important opportunity for us to move forward together. And I remember I started my job back in June, and I remember I was over here in May, kind of getting ready to start, and people were asking me about having this meeting. When can we get PSTA and MPO boards together to have a conversation about how we go forward? And I first wanted to get our own board together because we were unifying the PPC and unifying the MPO together, and we needed to see where we were going as an organization. So we've had two very productive workshops in the fall, and I think that's really positioned us to have this very productive conversation. So I really appreciate that. You all are going to be getting, you already have a lot of paper in front of you. You're going to be getting a little bit more paper in front of you. We're going to hand out my presentation, and so you can have that and take notes. I see you already have PSTA staff's presentation. We're going to keep our remarks and presentation comments to a minimum because we really want to foster a dialogue. But I do want to point you out to one handout that I handed out to people around here. I've got a few extras if anybody in the audience needs one, but it's just a worksheet to get you thinking about some of the ideas and things we want to talk about. On the first page, there's about 7 questions that if you can just skip through and think about as the discussion goes on, you're not expected to write down or record your notes, but if you do, there's a place for your initials, and you can turn those in to me, and we'll have them as part of the public record. but it's really more just a way for you to organize your thoughts. On the back page, we have a place for you to write down notes as you hear the presentation and the discussion, and if there are items that you have questions or concerns about on the left column, and on the right column, if you have ideas or suggestions about how we can work together effectively going forward, then you can write those down there. So again, it's just a worksheet, but please, if you use it, use your initials and turn it in. I want to tell you a little story. When I was a consultant, I went after some work with Star Metro, the transit agency in Tallahassee, and we were interviewing for the job, and we knew that they were going to be very critical of the teams about how they get to Star Metro, because if you know Tallahassee, it's way out west on Apple Yard near Capitol Circle. It's not near anything. Well, we took the bus over across town and went to the interview, and that was the very first question in the interview. How did you get here? So I just want to ask, how many people got here by bus today? All right, well, I didn't either. So that we need to work on that. And that to me is a big objective. If we're coming to a central location, if we're gathering, then transit ought to be a viable option for all of us in the room, and not just those who are forced to use it because they have no other options. And I think that's a goal we can all share. I did ride the bus yesterday, though, and it was the first time, I got to admit, that I was on a PSTA bus since I've been living here, and I'm embarrassed by that. But now, where I live, I'm right on the 66. It's very convenient. I can take it right into downtown Clearwater, and I plan to do that a lot more often. But about 15 or 20 years ago, I rode these buses all the time. I did market research, I did onboard surveys, I did a comprehensive operations analysis for PSTA. So I was very familiar, and now I'm just getting refamiliarized with the PSTA system. So let me walk you through our presentation today, and see if I can get, is this the right one loaded up? I think we have another one in here. Let's see, where's my... Right here. Okay. All right, here we go. Okay, good. So I wanted to start just with a little bit of an overview of the roles and responsibilities that we have in our relationship. And this really, I think, is the formal aspect of how we collaborate. And we can certainly go beyond these things, and I hope we do. But let me just kind of lay out a few things here. As an MPO, we are governed by federal law and state law as well. And both of those have a certain set of expectations. And just to look at it from a bare minimum, we are responsible for a coordinated transportation planning process. And that's without regard to mode, and it's without regard to agency. So we are the convener of multiple agencies. We are also uniquely responsible for one aspect of that transportation planning process, and that is, in an urban area like ours, we have the responsibility for setting transportation priorities. If you want federal dollars. Now, if you're going after county money, you don't have to go through the MPO. If you're going after some other local government source, but if you're going for federal dollars, that is the MPO's responsibility. And I think that's important. Now, there are some federal dollars that go directly to PSTA, but if you're talking about a major investment, Central Avenue Bus Rapid Transit comes to mind, and other types of services like that, then the MPO is the forum for that conversation. We are also responsible through our major planning documents, the Long Range Transportation Plan, the Transportation Improvement Program, for ensuring that those major projects are within those planning documents, that they are recognized, that there is a purpose and need for those projects, that there is analysis justifying those projects, and importantly, that they are, if they're going to advance through engineering, design, and construction, that they be in what's called our cost feasible plan. And that is a plan that is financially attainable based on the anticipated revenues that we have for a 25-year horizon out to 2040 currently. And we look at a wide range of revenues, and those revenues don't have to be federal and state sources. They can be local sources, they can be private sources, they can be a whole host of things, but we have to recognize those and assign them to projects. And importantly, they have to be allocated in the year of expenditure over the 25 years. And we do that by 5-year increments. So, for example, if you wanted to construct the Bus Rapid Transit project, Central Avenue, First Avenue North and South, we need to have that in our 5-year window of 2020 to 2025, for example. And then the federal law also mandates that we have a PSTA representative sitting on our board, and that's Mayor Bajowski. We've long done that in Florida, but that is new to a lot of MPOs around the country. We have two documents. We have the long-range transportation plan that is our long-term horizon, and then we have the 5-year TIP, Transportation Improvement Program, that is our short-range programming document. And what we do there is we essentially assign projects and assign responsibility and tie them to dollars. And we work with the Department of Transportation to figure out what those sources of revenue are for those projects. And Sarah, in a few moments, Sarah Ward of our staff will talk a little bit about the congestion management process, which is another aspect of how we look at managing congestion, improving safety, and the accessibility. We also are responsible for signing up to 8 planning factors. And it's interesting, if you go down this list, they're pretty similar to the criteria that are used by the Federal Transit Administration in evaluating new START projects or new capital investments for transit. Things like economic vitality, safety, security, accessibility, which is an important objective, I think, in Pinellas County, the environment, connectivity, efficient management, and preservation of the transportation system. Preservation of the system relates not only to the road network and how we maintain that, but also to how we replace buses, how we accommodate those kinds of activities. What's new for us over the last several years is what are called planning emphasis areas. These are set by the federal government. We are required at the MPO to have a performance-based, outcome-driven planning process. And what that means is we have to use a lot of data and we have to track how well we're doing. So if we advance a project, we have to be able to say, this is helping us achieve this outcome, and it's doing so through these metrics, through these performance measures. And to the extent possible, that has to be quantifiable. We can do some qualitative assessment of that, but it really needs to be, we are making this kind of step forward according to congestion, delay, safety, or improved mobility. We also are responsible for demonstrating that we're signing up to regional cooperation. And that's unique here in Tampa Bay because we have an MPO across the bay and one to our north, and we're all part of the same transportation management area. And we all share an allocation of funds from the federal government. So unlike a lot of places in Florida, we really have to work even extra hard to cooperate with our partners in this region. Ladders of opportunity is another expectation of the MPO. And if you're going after any kind of federal funds, you have to demonstrate that we have a transportation network that is helping people reach essential services, whether it be medical, education, shopping, those kinds of activities work, of course, but reaching out to those who are particularly disadvantaged, who have mobility limitations, and ensuring that they have access to those opportunities. We, under the FAST Act, our new federal law, Fixing America's Surface Transportation, I think, we have tourism and natural disaster risk reduction as other planning factors. So we have a lot that we have to encompass in our planning program. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the unification of MPO and PPC again and the responsibilities that we bring there. We have a countywide land use plan that the Board of County Commissioners, as the countywide planning authority, adopted back in August of last year. It is a streamlined land use planning process, but importantly, and you can see a little bit on this map, we have designated activity centers, we have designated multimodal corridors, we have identified target employment areas, and those are on our map. And we had this conversation with the county planning staff a few days ago. If everything's an incentive, nothing's an incentive. So we really need to work to ensure that our tools in our toolbox, from a planning and development economic opportunity standpoint, help reinforce and support those activity centers, those multimodal corridors, and target employment areas, because one of the things we really need to do here in Pinellas County is ensure that we have the jobs base and we have the housing opportunities for the next generation workforce, next generation residents. And if we continue the land use patterns that we've had, we're not going to do that. So we really are in a redevelopment mode. Through that countywide plan, we worked very closely with PSTA and the MPO staff at the time to develop a transit-oriented land use vision map. That's not this map, that'll be the next map, but this is the countywide plan. And in there, we've identified areas for higher densities and intensities. We've identified existing centers and corridors. recognized those, and we've provided future direction where new centers and corridors could be located. And this transit vision map, which is kind of ugly, but it serves a purpose. And what it does is, as land use amendments come to us by local government, we can look at this map and we can say, okay, you're coming into this center, then you have these kinds of expectations that we would like to see you fulfill. And a lot of that relates to how buildings come out of the ground, how parking is oriented, how walkable and accessible a site and location are. And we really have to be on the same page, local government, MPO, and PSTA, to make sure that that works well. We are also responsible for pulling together the projected growth in Pinellas County. We are the convener of all the local governments who look at their growth projections and where growth and development and redevelopment is happening. And this map just kind of identifies through either green or blue where those jobs and population are happening. And you can see jobs and people are in yellow, jobs are in blue, and the green is the combination of that. I'm pretty, I wouldn't say disappointed by this map, but I think we're aiming really low. You can look out over 2040, and the population increase is roughly about 60,000 people. And I've seen projections in the past in Pinellas County. If you really looked at the opportunity for redevelopment, that could be another 200,000 or 250,000 people, but it has to be in the right location. So that's not happening on the beaches. Permanent population is not going to happen on the barrier islands, but here in mid-county, up to the US 19 corridor, in certain parts of St. Petersburg and Clearwater, that can certainly happen, in Largo as well. So just keep in mind that this is a very conservative consideration. And also for jobs, only another 50,000 jobs in Pinellas County over the next 25 years. I think we can do better. And I think we can make those jobs more fulfilling for folks. Many of you have probably seen this graphic, but I like to use it because I think it encompasses what our responsibilities are at the MPO. And this isn't all on MPO staff. This is the team. This is the partnership of federal, state, and local agencies that we sign up to, and regional as well. We are responsible for planning, of course, and I think that brings a vision, goals, objectives, performance measures, but we're also responsible for programming and advancing projects in partnership with DOT, with the county, and with others who are the implementers. PSTA is an implementer. And that means identifying those capital projects, strategies, and working with partners to figure out, do we need to be creative, or are there traditional funding sources that we can use? And the last point in yellow is an afterthought a lot, and it's not considered, and we don't do a great job of that a lot of times, but it's increasingly important. And the expectation is on us is that we will do an increasingly better job at implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. When we put a project into our transportation improvement program, whether it be transit roads, bicycle, pedestrian, or intelligent transportation systems, we have to demonstrate that it is achieving those vision objectives. And that's a new responsibility for us, and we're going to be starting that process this year. Now, I put these slides together. I did not vet this with PSTA staff, and they have their own presentation to cover, but just how that fits in with PSTA, I think a few words here. PSTA, your business here is about transit operations and capital, and ensuring that there is a fully functioning operational network of buses and services that meet the needs of the community. It's more of a short-term planning focus versus a long-range planning focus, but PSTA is a partner with us in all of our activities. The focus is on operations, routing, scheduling, and replacement and maintenance. PSTA serves on not only on our board, Mayor Bajowski, but also chairs the Transportation Disadvantaged Local Coordinating Board, serves on our Technical Coordinating Committee as a voting member, Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and on our PPC Planners Advisory Committee. So it's a robust and strong planning relationship, and we really appreciate that. And having worked for both agencies over the last almost 3 decades, this is the best relationship that I've ever experienced. You may recall, if you've been around and involved in this process, that we've developed plans together over the years. The Pinellas Alternatives Analysis a few years ago, which was the foundation for the Greenlight Initiative. Clearwater to Clearwater Beach transit alternatives, looking at bus rapid transit and other means of reducing congestion over to the beaches. the Howard Franklin Bridge and Transit Study in partnership with FDOT. And FDOT, as a result of that study, is hardening the Howard Franklin Bridge, putting $25 million into that for future transit service. I've mentioned the long-range plan, but we also share resources. We provide about $80,000 a year to PSTA for planning activities, direct through us to PSTA. In addition, we partner with PSTA on studies and projects. Years ago, I think 2004, I led a capital facilities analysis for PSTA using funds from the MPO as the MPO's consultant. I also did market research for PSTA. So those kinds of collaborative opportunities have happened in the past, and we certainly want to continue that. And I mentioned the Transportation Improvement Program, and at our February meeting, we have an agenda item to move the Central Avenue Bus Rapid Transit into our cost feasible plan and into our Transportation Improvement Program because of assistance from the state to advance that project. There are some opportunities that we at the MPO and PPC staff feel we can improve on. Number one is integrating our long-range plan and the transit development plan. The TDP is PSTA's responsibility to produce in order to get state block grant funding. The long-range plan is our responsibility. And those sometimes circle in their own orbits. I think the last TDP that PSTA did was highly coordinated with us and our long-range plan, but sometimes that's not the case. And around the state, I will tell you, we don't do a very good job around the state of coordinating those two documents because the long-range plan has a vision component and the TDP has a vision component, but the time horizons are different. Aligning land use redevelopment and transit service operations, that's another opportunity for improvement. Not that it's bad, but again, if we can really focus on service and schedule changes that benefit and serve those redevelopment areas and target employment centers, then I think we'll benefit. Strengthening transit facility transfer points. There are roughly 18 or so hubs or places where PSTA buses converge. Many of those are not mixed-use walkable environments. Many of those are facilities that are shoehorned in to wherever the property owner would allow PSTA to go. They're not well lit. They're a little dark and scary in some cases, and there aren't full amenities at every one. And a lot of that is a right-of-way issue. A lot of that is a property owner issue. It's not a PSTA issue, but we can help. And I think we can work together to find, in some cases, maybe better locations, and in other cases, use our discretionary funds, our dollars, to improve safety and accessibility at those locations. Planning corridor development and multimodal integration. That's a mouthful, but what that means is as we look at our corridors, they're always going to be multi-jurisdictional. They're going to go through Largo, Pinellas Park, Clearwater, you name it. And that's really where the MPO comes into play because we can pull those partners together and we can ensure we're looking at land use and transportation and all elements of transportation together. And we need to do that in partnership because we're not the operators and we're not the implementers, but we are the conveners. Jointly developing and supporting our priority projects. Right now, that's a little bit of a bifurcated system. You develop your priority projects at PSTA, and we at the MPO kind of develop our priority projects. And we talk and we coordinate, but they're separate processes. So I think there's a way to maybe enhance that. And finally, achieving increased coordination between FDOT, PSTA, and MPO. We had a great conversation with Metroplan Orlando this week just to kind of get their take on how they're doing things. And they have a bi-weekly standing meeting, bi-monthly, so every 2 weeks, with the FDOT staff, Links, and Metroplan Orlando. And it's just to talk about coordination. And I think that's a great idea. I don't know if we need to meet every 2 weeks, but I think that regular standing meeting, just with the 3 agencies and the 3 staff, will go a long way. And you just can't get that done in our regular meetings, so I think that's a really great idea. So any questions on those roles and responsibilities before I go forward? Keep it flowing, huh? Okay. All right, y'all, the coffee hasn't kicked in, I'm afraid. So let me talk a little bit about vision and activities, and then in a minute I'm going to have Sarah come up and talk a little bit about our couple of items of how we do things. I don't know if this is our mission or not, but I'm going to say it is because I didn't find one, and so I wrote this, and I presented it to the Upper Tampa Bay Chamber up in Oldsmar, and they liked it. So I think our mission really is to align resources with a compelling vision to improve our community in the Tampa Bay region. And there's no word about transportation in there because we are a land use and transportation planning agency. I also think we have a secondary mission, which is to strengthen the understanding of issues and strategies that are important to an economically thriving, livable, and sustainable Pinellas County. Again, there's no mention of jurisdictions, and there's no mention of transportation in there. It's pretty all-encompassing. We, this year, with the help of our board, established what we call the Pinellas Strategic Planning and Operations Topics, or Spotlight. And there are 3 emphasis areas: enhancing beach access, the Gateway Mid-County Area Master Plan to improve connectivity, and a vision for the US 19 corridor, land use and transportation vision for that corridor. And all 3 of those areas, I think, really resonated with our board because they are the 3 critical economic engines outside of the downtowns of Pinellas County. And they are regional in scope, and they are multi-jurisdictional in scope. And over the next 2 years, we're going to be trying to move the needle to advance initiatives and to improve how we move about the county and how we develop and grow in a viable way in each of those 3 areas. We also have a responsibility for regional coordination, and that's been an important initiative, and all the buzz over the last 3 months has been about passenger rail opportunities that really emanated out of a September meeting at the Tampa Bay Transportation Management Area Leadership Group, which is comprised of representatives of the Pinellas MPO, Pasco MPO, and Hillsborough MPO. And that group came together a couple of years ago and has first established a regional priority list of projects. There are road projects, there are multimodal projects, and there are transit projects on that list of priorities, including PSTA priorities. We are also engaged with Hillsborough Area Transit, about to start, it'll be this fall, on a premium transit study funded by the Florida Department of Transportation that will look at alternatives for what kind of an investment should this region make in regional transportation, premium regional transit, which means fixed guideway or some other kind of premium transit that's competitive with automobile travel. And that is not focused on the CSX corridor. That is going to be considering a range of options: Gandy Bridge, Howard Franklin Bridge, Courtney Campbell Causeway, Tampa Road, north-south options as well. The CSX will be in that mix, but I want to be clear, I don't think that's being done purely because of CSX. It's being done for a lot of reasons. We are also partners with the Tampa Bay Area Regional Transportation Authority, or TBARTA, and Ray Shermonti is here, and with Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, and the new Executive Director, Sean Sullivan, is here in the room as well, and you'll get a chance to meet him. Those 2 organizations are really, they're at that regional picture, but they really focus on a lot of detail issues in terms of van pool and other types of transportation and land use activities. Finally, we have what's called a technical review team, where we meet over at DOT pretty often, and that's where we work on the tools for how we evaluate and prioritize projects. And that is all the MPOs and all the partners getting together. So I'm going to ask Sarah to come up and talk briefly about our congestion management process.
But before Sarah begins to speak, thank you for all of your comments and that great introductory vision that you gave to all of us. I would like for just a moment for Sean Sullivan to stand up so that we can all see who he is or a couple of people. He's our new executive director for the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, and I think that agency should also be included in terms of our partners, because Councilor Rice and I serve on the Planning Council, and transportation is a big issue for us there as well.
Right. Thank you for doing that. Welcome, Sean. Thank you.
Welcome.
Did you have any trouble parking your car? Okay, Sarah?
Good morning. I'm Sarah Ward. I'm with the MPO PPC staff, and just want to spend a few minutes talking to you about one of the MPO's other primary responsibilities, and that's our congestion management process. Let's see, is it this one? In terms of congestion management process, beginning I think in 1991, the federal government required that MPOs look at a process to address short-range operational issues with a focus on congestion relief and crash mitigation. And so in Pinellas County, we focus on what I call our constrained roadways. Those are roadways for which no additional widening is anticipated and for which we may have a major congestion problem or safety problem. Some of the things that we've looked at over the last several years in our congestion management process has been looking at bus rapid transit strategies in some of our major corridors. So what I'm showing here is we looked at Ulmerton Road bus preferential treatment around 2003 or so, also McMullen Booth Road. And when we say bus preferential treatment, that was looking primarily at how we might use intelligent transportation system strategies, such as signal priority for buses or queue jump lanes for buses, and that's where the buses are able to, at the intersection, jump the queue and proceed ahead of the regular traffic, again, in terms of giving transit a little bit more of an emphasis in terms of some of the congested corridors. Some of the other things that we've done with the transit focus through our congestion management system is a congestion management implementation plan that was done as a part of our 2040 long-range plan update. And in that congestion management implementation plan, we actually looked at all of the roadways system-wide, for which, again, there were no widening plans, and looked at how we might improve safety, mobility, access, some of the things that our chair mentioned earlier and that Whit mentioned earlier that we look at throughout our process, but how we might, through operational improvements, address some of those issues. And those operational improvements may include signal widening. A big focus in Pinellas County over the last decade or so, I think beginning around 2001, has been countywide implementation of an advanced traffic management system. In fact, I want to go back to this previous slide. Actually, I'm going the wrong way. Just going back to this previous slide, again, some of the things I mentioned, looking at lower cost, short-term projects to address safety, operations, and access, looking again at intersection improvements, signal timing, looking at how we provide better pedestrian, bicycle access to transit in terms of safety issues and things might impede a greater transit access, again, corridor studies, turn lanes, but to mention that Pinellas County put a big focus on ITS starting in 2001. And when we think about how ITS might benefit automobile traffic in terms of signal timing and sequencing and giving greater green time to those most congested roadways, that also benefits transit on those major roads. And in the early years of our ITS implementation, we prioritized US 19 and State Road 60. State Road 60 being one of PSTA's most productive routes. So some of our other projects that are congestion management related also provide benefit to transit. We still have much to do in terms of some of the transit initiatives, but our congestion management process does consider and include transit strategies. Again, this is just showing you that we've done some specific corridor studies looking at how we might give bus-related transit preferential treatment. None of that's been implemented to date, but we are still in the process of the overall implementation of the ATMS master plan, so opportunities are there still to implement some of these initiatives. As I mentioned earlier, McMullen Booth Road was one of the earlier CMP studies that we did. I think Mr. Blanton was involved in that study as well. Some of the early recommendations coming out of a prior study in terms of McMullen Booth was to put in the grade separated interchanges like you have on US 19. We determined that there was no way that we were going to do that in the McMullen Booth corridor. It still is one of our most congested corridors, so we've looked at intersection improvements and other things we might be able to do there to enhance mobility and access in that corridor. And again, I think we'll be looking at additional transit treatments in that corridor as we go forward. We've had recent conversations with Pasco County. They have a big focus on their end of that corridor. So from a regional and local perspective, I think we'll need to look at how transit can help operations, mobility, and safety in the McMullen Booth corridor. Shifting now to the MPO's prioritization process, as Whit mentioned, PSTA and the MPO currently have separate processes for identifying priority projects. What you see on the screen there are the prioritization criteria that were used for the most recent long-range plan update. These have evolved over the years, so they're not necessarily the criteria that were used in earlier updates, but well, first we looked at whether or not a project was included in the previous long-range plan. With regard to a number of our projects, there's a long-standing priority in terms of the improvements, and so just in terms of continuing to implement priorities that had been identified earlier. In some cases, I think we're determining there may be a need to revisit some of those earlier visions, such as US 19, but we did give some weight to the fact that a project had been included in a previous LRTP. We also looked at whether or not it was on the adopted priority list for the 5-year work program. And again, if it was on the priority list, we assumed that was still an MPO priority, and that was also given credit. Looking at gaps in the network, if design was already underway, access to intermodal facilities, including transit facilities, looking at in terms of providing access to employment centers, and if it's a part of the state strategic intermodal system. Those are the higher level facilities for which the DOT prioritizes the funding in Pinellas County. That includes most of US 19, the interstate system, Gandy Boulevard. So those are what we would consider in Pinellas County as your CIS facilities. Others include our local airport. It is now designated as a CIS airport, so access roads to the airport are included in terms of the CIS criteria, and in the future, the Gateway Express will become a part of the strategic intermodal system. What you see next is the CMP sweep score. That's our congestion management process for prioritizing operational improvements. That process gives 60% of the weight to congestion mitigation, 40% to crash reduction. Again, focuses on mobility, reducing congestion, and crash mitigation. So we consider whether or not it has a CMP score of 100 or greater. We also look again at crash locations. If it's a top 25 location, additional weight was given for that. And we did consider whether or not the corridors that we were prioritizing, the roadway and corridors, included premium transit as identified in the long-range plan and the transit development plan. And then finally, the Transportation Improvement Program priorities, I want to mention that's based on the long-range plan priority projects. There is a requirement that there be a direct linkage between what we show in our long-range vision plan, the 2040 plan, and the projects included in the 5-year work program. And with that, unless there are any questions, I'll turn it back over to Brett.
You talked about the long-range transportation plan prioritization projects. Does that include the county projects, or are they independent from that? I think they're independent, and is there an opportunity to hold them together? We've got several county commissioners.
Right. The prioritization criteria shown here were used primarily for the state and federal roads for which the MPO has direct authority in terms of its plan. We did develop criteria for county roads in coordination with Pinellas County government staff. They were not integrated together. We work with the county with regards to its roads, so we do have a prioritized list of county roadways. Criteria is a little bit different, and again, they were not melded together in terms of one overall list, because we were trying to set the priorities for those projects for which the MPO has the authority to allocate funds. But we recognize that Pinellas County government is a major player in terms of an implementing agency in Pinellas County. So we work with Pinellas County directly, but there was a different process for prioritizing their projects because they had to consider at the time, it's gone away now, but things such as transportation concurrency and matters such as that.
All right, thank you, Sarah. I kind of blew past the agenda. We were going to have PSTA talk about their path forward, and I apologize. So, Brad, if you want to come up and I can get your presentation up. That's the woes of PowerPoint, right?
Good morning, everyone.
What? Oh, no. Okay. As a recent one of our customers, thank you for writing. And the PowerPoint thing is kind of consistent with something we try very hard not to do, but blow by customers who are standing there on the side of the road. So we have some experience with that. No problem. First, I want to thank all of you for taking the time to come here to PSTA. This, I think, Chairman Kennedy and I have discussed. We think this would maybe the first time ever for such a joint meeting of the leaders of the Metropolitan Planning Organization and PSTA. So thank you very much for doing that. I also want to give a specific shout out of thanks to Commissioner Patty Johnson for spending the last 48 hours with me driving up and back to Tallahassee. And I think we had some really great meetings up there with our delegation and other officials, FDOT, about our priority projects, very positive response to the Clearwater Beach, to the Airport Express, and increased transportation disadvantage funds, which is also something that we partner directly with the MPO on. So thank you for coming to that. I think that demonstrates what I'm going to be presenting here is how PSTA has been very focused on, as Whit very appropriately said, implementing the programs that are part of our strategic plan. I know most of the PSTA board members have perhaps even had this tattooed on them, and probably even the MPO members have probably heard us talking about our path forward strategic plan. The PSTA board spent a lot of time, and I think a lot of good deliberations over the past year since Greenlight in putting this together, this comprehensive strategic plan for the organization. And what I'm going to show in just a second is this has allowed us to have substantial focus as the PSTA, as an implementing agency in achieving successful results thanks to this strategic plan, just since it's been adopted last May. What this plan emphasizes is that PSTA is a customer-oriented organization. As the triangle shows, at the very bottom, our foundation is a customer-oriented public transit service. We aim to provide value to our customers every day, and barring a hurricane from happening this afternoon, I will be down demonstrating that at Grand Central Station in St. Petersburg for my first customer town hall, maybe joined by some of our board members. And then we'll duplicate that in other parts of the county, just listening to our customers. We provide 45,000 trips a day to customers of Pinellas County, and that's very much our focus. When you move up through this, the next level is developing a strong governance model for effective transportation leadership. That level is demonstrated exactly what we're doing today. Having the leaders of the Pinellas MPO and the leaders of PSTA get together and work to better align our priorities is exactly what that's about. The PSTA board had a lot of discussions about this and strongly believe that the citizens, maybe a lesson that we learned from Greenlight was the citizens, the community expects us to have strong transportation. You prioritize what you want, what transportation priorities you want. So check that box. Thank you for coming. The rest of the triangle as it moves up, or sort of like how we implement things, we've got our capital program and our operating program. Again, we're a customer-driven organization trying to provide that value each and every day. Since Greenlight, we have worked very hard to look within ourselves and try to find efficiencies and cost savings and ways in which we might sustain what we have, maintain what we have before we look to the future. We do have a plan to incrementally improve. We have projects that
have been very well coordinated with the MPO already. That are incremental improvements, no silver bullet of a green light necessarily, but incremental improvements while we maintain the service that we have. And last, at the very top, which I think every organization needs, even though we are working and this whole meeting is about how we can work closer together with the MPO, it is important and I think appropriate for PSTA as an organization to have a vision. And I'm going to demonstrate that that vision is exactly aligned with what the MPO and the Pinellas Planning Council have as as the long-term plan for the whole community. Again, I think the greatest value of this Path Forward strategic plan, in addition to cluttering up the dais downstairs so that every board member has one at all times to focus on, is it has provided focus to the organization. And that has already achieved results, as demonstrated on this slide. When we're constantly looking forward, you often don't realize, maybe even think you're not really gaining any ground until you turn around and look back to where you've been. And you can see the results that we've achieved just in the last 6 months. We have begun developing an operating plan that looks out 5 years and a financial forecast that looks out 5 years. We have a great program with our transit amenities. That's bus shelters and benches and bus stops and signage and things like that, that areas like Pinellas Park and the beach communities. The Big C, I know, is partnering with us to have more transit amenities that help our customers. The board made a lot of decisions this past fall on a new streamlined fare policy that's generating more revenue, that we can support our services. Our UPass program continues to expand. That generates more revenue and provides efficiencies. We now have, I think, with P-Tech, St. Pete College, USF St. Pete, almost every person that can say they're a student, and we're going to work on Pinellas County Schools next on the UPass program. Again, PSTA is constantly looking for ways to become more efficient, to provide better service for our customers. But we know that we can only achieve these results when we have this focus that this Path Forward plan has provided. So that's why I'm very excited about this idea that we partner closer with the MPO, because if we align our priorities together, that just provides even more power to our region and a better focus that can achieve great results. Now, as we look out into the 5-year plan, the issues that are on the horizon that the PSTA board certainly knows are having a sustainable capital program for us and an operating program. In 2006, we received a very generous earmark from Congressman Bill Young that allowed us to buy 46 buses, about a quarter of our entire fleet, in one year. Now, unfortunately, 2006 was about 11 years ago, so those buses are soon going to become due for replacement. And that is a real challenge that the PSTA board has been working through over the past 6 months, about the right balance of how we maintain and have a sustainable fleet replacement program, how we show leadership in the community by looking at new technologies and the type of buses that we buy, and how that impacts the service we provide, whether we might contract out, have more public partnerships so that a private entity owns the vehicles and we don't have to replace those. Those are all decisions that the board is going through now as a process as part of this strategic plan. But I think it's still very helpful that we wouldn't have had this focus on this capital program without the strategic plan. That does have ripple effects on our service plans. The number of buses, obviously, we have needs to support the service that we've designed. And we are still moving forward with a plan to provide more streamlined routes throughout the entire county. That was part of the Green Light plan that was the community recommendation to provide faster routes or routes that got them from point A to point B faster. Not necessarily speeding faster, but that didn't necessarily deviate out into every single neighborhood. Provide a grid network across the county. That's why the Valentine's Day implementation of a grid network in downtown St. Petersburg is so very important, and it is a huge accomplishment for the organization. Getting out of the hub and spoke system that we've had since 1952 in St. Petersburg and expanding the breadth of the transit system throughout a growing downtown into a grid system is a great accomplishment, and it's exactly a model that the whole community bus plan speaks to for the entire county. So that's what we're immediately going to be start moving on to beyond after Valentine's Day, is looking at the rest of the county, especially northern Pinellas County. Try to make those routes streamlined and operate more as a coordinated system. These are the kind of projects and successes that focus and coordination can achieve. Of course, we have a long-standing priority list of projects. These projects came out of the community bus plan. They have maybe not been initiated by the Pinellas MPO, but we're very grateful. These projects would not be moving along as they are without the support of the Pinellas MPO. And the Pinellas MPO members know that you have adopted or supported each one of these projects in your plans and even with letters of support and things like that. We're very, very thankful to our partnership with the Florida Department of Transportation for providing the final design funds for the long thought of Central Avenue Bus Rapid Transit project. And now we're changing our focus to the federal government and working with the feds to implement that Central Avenue BRT. As I mentioned, our number one priority, and Patty and I were just in Tallahassee, and we'll be back there again, looking at a system from Clearwater Beach, an express bus from Clearwater Beach to the airport. And I want to thank the MPO for recently writing a letter of support for that project. We have a great partnership with our sister agency over in Tampa, HART. And I think next week they are going to their board and adopting the contract that will get us, within 2016, I'm hopeful, an app on your phone where you'll be able to pay your transit fare by using your phone. That's where the whole technology is going, and we're trying to be innovative there as well. And like I said, we do have a vision. The path forward keeps a focus on the vision. And it's amazing, because I saw this in Witt's slide as well. Our vision is your vision, or your adopted Pinellas Planning Council plan is based on a network of services across the entire county. We don't have, our financial forecasts show that we don't have the resources today to implement this entire plan. But by putting it out as the vision and making sure that all of the projects that we work on that we can implement meet with that vision, that's what transportation management is all about. PSTA has shown and is a doer. We take these plans and we implement them. We have shown accomplishment and getting things done. And so I'm confident as long as we have this vision out there, even if we can't necessarily see how we're going to get there right now with the finances, we will be able to get there by keep focusing on having a coordinated approach. So again, where we stand today is, I think we've got a great focus, and I'm hoping that thank you very much to WIT and the MPO board for working with us to tackle some of these issues. I know we cannot get all the way to where we want to be without coordinating with the MPO. We have some major decisions over the next 5 years still to make, but it's a process that we're going through. And we want to work with the MPO on that. Obviously, I think Whit's going to show some examples about how other MPOs have and transit systems have worked together. One is on the capital program, on the decisions we make on the types of buses and how we fund the bus program at PSTA for new expansion projects as well as maintaining what we already have. And two is implementing these pilot programs around the region, the Central Avenue BRT, the Clearwater Express, the fare collection, how the MPO can support those projects, providing a better service that will lead to a better service for our customers that we're providing. Those are really the two issues, and I know that the members of the PSTA board who have been here, some know that these are what we're focused on. So with that, I'll take any questions or comments from you.
What's the timetable for your pilot projects?
Well, so the Central Avenue BRT, we had a great jump start to that with the DOT funding of the final design. We are now moving through a federal process that is somewhat long, but we have very high hopes of success ultimately. Completing the final design, starting construction in about 2 years, and opening day hopefully sometime in perhaps 2020. The Clearwater Beach to TIA Express, it's our #1 legislative priority, and it's had very strong support. Senator Latvala and Representative Chris Latvala both have it already in as their priority project. Hopefully, what we talked to them when we were up there just yesterday was working perhaps in the same model we did with the Central Avenue project and coordinating that through the Florida DOT. And so that project is an operating project, so it can be implemented as soon as we secure the funding. Like I said, the regional fare collection, the moving to smart cards and mobile ticketing on your phone. HART is going to be signing the contract in the next couple weeks, and the first order of business for the contractor is this mobile app. The PSA should be able to implement very quickly.
Thank you.
Yes, Patty.
I just wanted to add that when Brad said we went up to Tallahassee and talked to everyone we could get into, one of the things that we shared with them that they had no idea about, we have I'm the chairman of the Transportation Disadvantage, the local coordinating board, and we went up there to share with them the following information. And Doreen is on the Tri-County Transportation Disadvantage Local Coordinating Board. You can't get it all on one line. And they have been meeting since 2014. And so just to give you a little bit of figures, transportation disadvantaged is comprised of people that are living on a means test on 150% of
poverty.
Okay.
Or lower.
That includes on our board, thank you, Sarah, takes care of it all the time. We sit down and meet with JWD, PARK, UPARK, the veterans, workforce, Vivian, who's somewhere around here, and we meet with all those people that qualify for transportation disadvantage. We get a certain amount from the state that all has to get chopped up among these agencies. Plus, we give out and mail $11 for the month for transportation, which we just raised from $8.75, and I thought everyone was going to have a heart attack. But I'm going to get this to come up again because I can't remember. Dementia's really tough. The demographic breakdown of the population of Hillsborough is 1.3 million. 65 plus is 12%. Population with disabilities, 22%. Population in poverty, 22%. TD trips, transportation disadvantaged trips provided in 2014-15 was 697,392. Pinellas, on the other hand, has a population of 910,651, 19% of the population. Population with disabilities, 13%. Population in poverty, 14%. Transportation disadvantaged trips provided 2014-2015 is 2,664,655. And that's not the sad part. The sad part is the potential TD customers served in Hillsborough is 6%, Pasco 3%, and Pinellas 9%. So when Brad keeps telling you that we're customer oriented, there's a whole bunch of people out there that we serve that have desperate needs. These are people that we're trying to put back to work, we're trying to get to the doctor, we're trying to take care of their needs. Things like JWB told us in last year, well, we found out that a lot of kids don't, when school is out, don't get to eat all day. So what we want to do is go pick up those kids and take them to a central place and feed them and give them some food to take home. Our only problem is we don't have transportation to do it. The year before that, the schools decided to make sure that if you pick up a kid at First Avenue or First Street North, that's where they're taking the kid back to. They're not taking them. They refuse to take them to after-school activities. So they take the kids home and they're back out on the street. We have a lot of challenges that go on every day that affect every city and the county tremendously. So when we're trying to work with people, you have to think, we also have those problems. Transportation is so crucial to everything that we do every day in every community. So I just wanted to share that with you. That's what we shared yesterday, and our legislators have no clue.
Thank you, and thank you, Patty, for bringing that up, actually. And I just want to put out there today, this morning, that we're also going back up there next Wednesday and Thursday to sit on the chair of the MPO-AC. And so if anybody has anything that they want us to go up, and as I said to Patty this morning, if there's anything that they want us to get with any of our legislators next Wednesday and Thursday, we'll be back up there again with the MPO-AC. So we're happy to take emails or any of the requests. Have our voice of Pinellas, our region. You know, I sit on the TMA as well, as Whit said in our presentation. 2 years ago, we started our TMA leadership board with Pinellas Classical Principal. We're making some really great headway on that board. And what's really nice about that is that it brings us together with a bigger voice, a stronger voice in Tallahassee with the legislation in the House and the Senate. So those works are going to help us tremendously in Pinellas County. And the biggest thing I think that we need to champion is the fact that in the state of Florida, Pinellas County is the most densely populated. Every one of us here in the room knows that. But all of us need to unify that voice and get that up to Tallahassee and try to get, and to DC, quite frankly, because the legislation in DC just passed a new budget. I think that there's time for us to go to DC as well and start figuring out how we can get some stuff in there.
Going to mayor's conferences, one thing that I learned at this past summer is that the PSTAs throughout the country, there's a lot of them that partner with the school systems. They've either gotten completely rid of the school buses and all of the schools ride the PSTAs, or they partner with them for extracurricular activities into baseball, basketball, football, so that they have lanes for the school buses. they'll pull in there, you know, if football practice gets over at 4 o'clock, they're there at 4 o'clock to take the kids, Northern County, Southern County, you know, wherever the normal route would be. You know, they just make an extra trip along their regular thoroughfare if they pull into those to pick up the kids so that they have a way of getting home, which will keep kids out of trouble, and it will also give them an opportunity. For some reason, if, you know, in the morning they had a doctor's appointment, dentist appointment or something like that, they can hop on one of those buses to get to school so that then the parent can get to work after something like that. So I think that the ridership program that you're doing for St. Pete College, P-Tech, that's getting ready to come on board, hopefully Pinellas County Schools will work with you on that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thank you for both the presentations so far. I think they've been real good ways to get some focused discussion. And again, may just be wordsmithing, but communicating obviously all the time things that we talk about in public is important. So when we talk about pilot project action, just want a little bit more definition of what you mean by pilot project. I mean, I think there are some things that we're doing in conjunction with our university college that might be pilot projects to see how they are taken. But when we have committed to a Central Avenue project, at least it seems to be a pretty high priority, that it's not really a pilot, at least the way I define pilot activity. So I just want to make sure that as we go out, we're talking about this is a solid project that we're moving forward on. There might be some activities in the coming year, but the public needs to understand that's a project that's coming. It's not something that we're just trying. So I just want to make sure I understand what your thoughts are about the pilot project and how it can be used to help us advance a message or maybe get us in the wrong direction. So I just want to make sure that
Okay.
we're on the same page. No big deal. It just
Yeah, no, that's excellent feedback. And again, you're exactly right. The Central Avenue BRT is a real project that is going to happen. We are committed to that. But I think the idea of calling these pilot projects was in the sense that we hope that Central Avenue project all these projects will be models for future similar projects. In that sense, not that it's a pilot that we're going to possibly, or expect might go away in that sense. But I agree that messaging, maybe we can take a look at that. But yeah.
I have the same concern, just so you know. I didn't pick up on the other way you could look at that. I kept thinking, how is Central Avenue BRT a pilot project?
Implement something like that, show how it works, and then demonstrate effectiveness, and then it can be potentially applied in other courts. That's I think, how we're thinking. Right? Any other questions?
Just a comment. I think it's important as we go through these processes, and those are two great presentations, that we're coordinating with HARP and also our friends across the Bay. And I know PSTA has pretty regular communications with HARP, but I think it's really important that we include them in these discussions.
That's a really good point. I mentioned earlier about the premium transit study that will get started this fall sometime. I actually have a meeting this afternoon over with the HART CEO and Hillsborough MPO director to talk about some basic initial scoping elements of that premium transit study. And one key issue that I think I've mentioned to our board and many of you is that is going to be led by HART, and they have a governing board. So what is the role of PSTA board, the MPO board here in Pinellas, the TMA leadership group in shepherding that study through? And I think that kind of understanding needs to be set at the beginning as we begin scoping this project so that we have a clear expectation of how we'll all be engaged in evaluating and reviewing and potentially taking action on recommendations that come out of the study. And I think if we get that sort of squared away, then the scoping aspects will be really easy from there.
Yes, thank you both of you for the presentation. I have a question now. I don't sit on MPO, but I'm wondering if in your workshopping or visioning sessions that you have with regard to the future, is there discussion about doing things besides building. I know the CSX thing is on the radar, but beyond that, is there any discussion that's very visionary and isn't just focused on roads?
Absolutely. We've had that conversation in 2 work sessions with our board, and we continue to have that discussion at virtually every meeting. What I've been preaching is a balanced approach to transportation. And we do it pretty well at the planning level. And then when it comes to what we fund, we do it okay, but we could do better. And so I think we need to look at what does a balanced transportation system look like? What does it look like in Pinellas County? What does it look like regionally? How do we contribute to that? Those are questions that I don't think we have complete answers for yet, because we only have so much money, and we have to really think about what projects we have in the pipeline with those dollars, and how do we shift, pivot, or tap into new resources if we can to achieve that balance. What I'll show you in a little bit after our break and after we hear from the Department of Transportation is how Metroplan and Austin, Texas, 2 MPOs, how they have worked to achieve some balance. And so maybe that'll give you some ideas, but we're at the very beginning stage of thinking through that. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, I think it's really critical because when Councilor Rice and I went with Brad to D.C. and met with the transportation folks up there, they were very, very focused on making sure that we understood that going forward, dollars coming from the federal government would require regional projects and those kind of projects that move a lot of people all at once. And
transportation alternatives necessarily coming out of Pinellas County. And I think in some respects that has led PSTA to sort of develop its own very kind of structured goals. Our as you well know, our legislative objectives, going to Washington D.C., fighting for these projects, etc. But now that Witt is here, we have the potential, and the MPO board behind him, so much more opportunity to work together. I won't feel so helpless when I'm in there in Tallahassee. I think he's done a really great job of bringing this together.
Okay, my mother helped him write that. Is there somebody over here who hasn't had Commissioner Welch?
Yeah, real quickly, 2 things. Okay. Commissioner Eggers mentioned some of the resistance in the past has been, PSTA taking over the entire transportation system for the school system. But as you said, if you can support extracurricular activities, and at the same time you are showing a whole generation of young people how to use transit in Pinellas County. So we are using that exact approach, and I think it's important. Thank you.
I think we have Mayor Johnson.
I just wanted to sort of piggyback on what Commissioner Long was talking about. I'll try to repeat what you said. You were concerned, is the MPO looking at things other than building roads? Really multimodal.
Visionary.
Yes, and one of the things that I feel since Witt's come on board, not just since Witt's come on board, but he's made it a major focus, is, and it's just a small little piece, but that when we look at any corridor or street or whatever, that there's a project or that there's a congestion or solving a problem, that we have to look at it, and we all know what the term means, but it's broader, in a complete streets way. So if there's a street, yes, it's a road, does it have the sidewalks? Should it have a bus lane? Does it have, the intelligent lighting system? Should there be a bus rapid transit on it? Should there be rail on it? All of those different, is there a bike lane? Looking at it from all the different realms, rather than just how do we get more automobile traffic down that road. So that's one thing that I feel is where MPO is really going. It's just a piggyback on what you were saying, and I think it's important that we all look at whatever corridor we're doing and look at it that way, that it is multimodal in multiple different ways.
I would say complete streets is something that we can apply to a lot of roads. but we have to pick and choose our investments very wisely.
Right.
And that cost benefit and that bang for the buck is really something that we have to collectively with PSTA and all our partners pay a lot of attention to.
Well, and that might, it also might include the city where the road is.
Absolutely.
I mean, the city may contribute to the improvement of the sidewalk, where PSTA may contribute to the bus service, and MPO, and maybe it's the county on this one, improves the actual road. I mean, it's bringing all the partners in, but MPO is sort of the visionary of it all. Hey, we've got these 5 things that need to happen on this road, and MPO can pull all those partners in together.
Right. Let's take 1 or 2 more comments and then take a break, and then we have Florida Department of Transportation District 7 here to cover a few items, and then I'm going to get to some case studies, and then we'll open it up for a full-on conversation for probably the last hour or so. So yes, Mr. Burrow?
I just wanted to piggyback on something that both Mayor Gregory and Commissioner Welch was talking about, the school system transportation. I think that's low-hanging fruit that we really should pursue, and I think pretty quickly that transportation disadvantaged kids not being able to get to the after-school programs because the buses don't drop them off. And I love the idea of having PSTA buses stop at the school for those kids that are in football or whatever and have missed the bus. What a wonderful idea and a wonderful combination of resources. And I think we should go after that quickly. I think Dr. Greger would be receptive to something like that.
Yes.
Just one thing, just so that you know some numbers. The Boys and Girls Club of Pinellas County serves after-school programs. And 3 years ago, when the school board said, you're going home, you're not going anywhere else, the Boys and Girls Club lost over 1,000 young people that were going to after-school programs. Just Boys and Girls Club, that does not count all the other programs, the JWE, our school,
Girls Incorporated.
Girls Incorporated, all the others. So just Boys and Girls Club, 1,000 kids out on the street.
We have 2 more, okay, so Councilmember Rice.
I just want to throw out there that I hope, what I'd like in the next hour and a half of our conversation that's left, I'd like to kind of get a sense of where the opportunities for innovation are. Because, I mean, there has been oftentimes a top-down approach, and the feds certainly finance these projects, and we work with the state to finance and build projects. And with the FAST Act, there were probably some who would have hoped that there would have been more in the budget for local innovative projects. But I would like to get a sense and maybe hear from our FDOT representatives and have this part of the conversation where they see the opportunities for innovative ideas that come from the transit and the MPO agencies.
Yeah, just take 1 second. Back, kind of open it up for some general conversation, but I guess the point I was trying to make on the pilot comment was really about communication to the public, and whether you call it Transit 2040 or whatever, but as we communicate victories that we have along the way, whether it's PSTA or MPO, I think it's important that we communicate those to the public, and we do it in such a way that it's packaged in a long-term vision, so that when we say something like the UPass program is having such successes, that translates to ridership increases in more of a reality to people that may be looking skeptically at a system. So and that's why Central Avenue, I mean, in a sense, that's a victory. And it needs to be spoken as a victory and not as something we're just contemplating. It's different than some of the things that we're contemplating. The UPass may be a short-term thing to say, is it going to work? Is it going to succeed? And so I think it's real important to get buy-in from the public, is to show these long-range plans that we have, long-range thought, but at the same time, those incremental pieces that are major things, connecting airport to beaches, connect the Central Avenue. Those are big things, not just little things. We're not talking about a big framework here. We're trying to incrementally advance a program that people will accept
and ultimately buy into. So.
And our partners at Pinellas County Economic Development and Visit St. Pete Clearwater, that message can get wrapped up into how we talk about Pinellas County. And I've told this story to a few people. We just hired a new planner who started a week or so ago and graduated from the University of Florida, Commissioner Roach. And he lives in Tampa, and he commutes to Clearwater, which is a brutal commute from South Canada. But he's living with his parents, he's got student bills to pay off and everything. And he said, I'm like every other millennial. I want to live in a walkable neighborhood, I want to be close to work, I want to be able to ride my bike. And I said, well, one thing about Pinellas County is you have many more opportunities to find a place to do that in Pinellas County than you do in any other county in this region. You have a few in Hillsborough, you have maybe a few in Pasco, maybe a few in Manatee County. But in Pinellas County, we probably have 18 to 20 different neighborhoods that are live, work, play, accessible places. And there's not a county like it in Florida for that reason. So I think that's an important selling point. And if we can get our transportation network and our land use plans to reinforce that, then we are speaking with one voice about this county. I would like to take a break now and let DOT run their presentation, get a cup of coffee, do what you need to do. We'll convene within 10 minutes at 10:40, and then we'll get back to some best practices and the conversation. Thank you very much. I want to take this opportunity to introduce Debbie Hunt, who is Director of Transportation Development for Florida Department of Transportation District 7. And just a little bit of history, not to date us too much, but I first got to know Debbie a long time ago. She was my project manager when I worked on the very first transit development plan in the state of Florida, which was here for PSTA. I won't give the year, but that program's been around for a little while. And Debbie and I, it was a great working relationship back then, and I'm confident that we'll continue to have a great working relationship. So Debbie, welcome, and thank you for being here very much.
Thank you, Whit. Good morning. Okay, my voice is usually pretty low. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Pleasure to be here today. A lot of great opportunities to talk about. Chairs, members of both boards. It's kind of a unique way to have to address folks. Obviously, I'm Debbie Hunt, and I just think that each of y'all should know first and foremost that the department staff has a wonderful working relationship with both the MPO staff and the PSTA staff. And I think that gives us a great starting point for how do we go forward and how do we really do some game changer type projects. One of the things I think is important is there's a difference between how DOT works and how the local governments work. And our mission's a little bit different than the local government's missions, though it's somewhat the same. Ours is a regional focus on the movement of people and goods. The local government's is on a local focus for the movement of people and goods. And so part of what, and it was interesting, I'm picking up on different pieces of the conversation that's already started. Part of what's important in the overall conversation for the department is we focus first on safety. We focus on preservation of our existing system, first and foremost, and then we focus on continuing to add to the system and focus on each of the different modes that are out there. Our program has funding in the airports, we have funding in the ports, we have funding in the transit agencies, we have funding on the state roads that we're responsible for, and we work with everybody with the federal funding to put those funds where they're most needed as we move forward. We all at DOT live, work, and play in these communities as well. We have many employees who live and play here in Pinellas County, though they may work over in our district office, which is in Tampa. And so we have a personal focus as well as a professional focus to what we're doing. We're all focused as a whole on on the regional movement of people and goods. And we're also focused on how do we maximize and, in some cases, leverage the funding resources that we have available to us. And the leveraging of it is where we really have the discussion with the local governments and work to ensure that the projects that are moving forward on the MPO priority list are those projects that are going to give us the greatest return on our infrastructure dollars. These are some of the areas I'm going to touch on today. How we do it today, taking it to a whole new level, why we request that leave the funding to us. I'll explain that more. I heard the chuckles. The Transportation Alternatives Program, timing of projects, and then some additional tips that will help us all. The way we currently work with the MPO on prioritization is there's a lot of number one priorities. And when DOT receives a list that has priorities for state roads, priorities for county roads, priorities for transportation alternatives, priorities for congestion mitigation, and for transportation alternatives and safety projects, it's a real challenge for us to actually fund what are the top priorities here in Pinellas County. And so one of the things, and I'll get into that in just a minute, there's also, that was definitely an ADHD moment. Okay, well, we also sometimes lack the supporting documentation that helps us truly fund a project. Because when we see a project, and I'll use a sidewalk project as an example, and it says this sidewalk project from point A to point B for $150,000. Generally, our folks that do estimates can look at that project that is 9 miles long and say, not going to happen for $150,000. So one of the things we need to have is clear definition of what the scope is and clear definition of what is it really going to cost us. Sometimes we're asked to fund with specific funding types. Sometimes we're asked to take a project off the list. We know we've already started acquiring right-of-way, but that's not our priority anymore. We need to take it off the list. No, once we get into the design of a project, we're going to move through each of the phases. Otherwise, we would be designing a lot of good projects out there, and we would never be implementing any projects. And currently, the list does not include transit priorities. Moving forward, some of our preferences that would be important to us is that we have a single list that identifies what the priorities are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You guys do a much better job than most in providing lists to us in that way. We just are asking, let's streamline it a little further. The other thing that we're asking for is really flesh out those projects. Tell us what the scope of the project is, and tell us whether you have the right-of-way necessary to do it or not, because if you don't, and you have to get into the federal right-of-way process, you just slow the project way down, and that's generally not the intent of moving forward with some of these projects. And we also need a true definition of what is the estimate of the project. Are there utilities that are affected? Are we using concrete? Are we using asphalt? All of these things make a huge difference as we're trying to program projects. And the reason I tell you that is because DOT, the Florida statute says that we maintain the first 3 years of our work program. That's our commitment to the public, that these are the projects we're going to go build. And when all of a sudden we start digging into the project that we funded and the funding doesn't match what the description said, it then creates problems for us because projects have to move out, or you don't build the length of the project that you told the public you were going to go build. And when we fund our program, we fund it down to the nth degree with the funding, because we're going to spend every nickel that's programmed in that year, the year we say we're going to program, the year we say we're going to fund it. And so we really have to have detailed information. Some of the advantages to that is by giving the information to us as we need that truly defines the priority, we know exactly what you want us to fund. We're not second guessing from different lists. We're focused on, this is your list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this is what we need to program. We also, it allows us to use funds where we need to use them, depending on the type of project that it is. Funding types. We have 60 or more, that's just kind of groupings of funding types in our department's work program. And so we ask always, just tell us what your priorities are and leave the flexibility of what types we use on what types of projects to us, because there's funding types used all around the district, and there's certain types of projects that we need to be able to have that flexibility. There's some projects that you really don't want federal funds on, so leave us the flexibility to keep state funds on those projects. There's some projects that have to have federal funding. If it's an off-system project or it's a local sidewalk or local trail, we have to put federal funds on those. So we just need the flexibility to be able to put funds where we need to, and that way we can fund as much as possible in your overall program. Transportation Alternatives Program. This is that used to be the enhancement program. And I know from having spent time at many MPO meetings, that program, whether it's the Transportation Alternatives or previously the enhancement program, there's more discussion on those projects that are the least expensive projects in the department's work program than on any other type of projects that we work with. And so one of the things that's important for the region, especially as regional trails continues to be a very hot topic for discussion, is that your transportation alternatives funding, we are looking at it from a transportation management area perspective. And that perspective is Pinellas County, Pasco County, and Hillsborough County. And we are going to be working with each of the MPOs over the next 6 months to really define what the expectation is of those projects, so that as they're prioritized and given to us as a regional list, that it's not what it has been for many, many years, which is we do one in Pinellas, we do one in Hillsborough, we do one in Pasco. We do one in Pinellas, one in Hillsborough, one in Pasco. We really need to know what the regional priority of these projects is so that we can fund them appropriately. Make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay. Removing or deferring funded projects. I mentioned a little bit ago that once we start moving forward with the project, now, when I say once we start moving forward, once we start getting into design, that's when we're going to expect to continue the process and go all the way through to construction. When we do a project development and environmental study, which is our first step, sometimes a no build is the option, and so we don't move forward with it. Sometimes when we come out with the alternatives and you see how much that's going to cost, you say, well, that's not really our highest priority. We'd like to get these other projects done first and come back to that. And so once we're good with doing a project development and environmental study and then making a decision, yes or no, we're moving forward or not moving forward. But once we start with design, we are going to expect to complete the project without changing of the priorities. That allows us to continue to have work program stability, and it allows us to fulfill the commitment that we have to the public that this is what we're going to be building over the next few years. Some of the things to consider. We're going to provide staff that is focused on working with the MPO staff and also with the different local jurisdiction staff to really help flesh out what the scopes of your projects are and what they're really going to cost. And do you or don't you have the right of way? And what other things are considerations in those projects? That way, when the list actually comes to the MPO board, you guys know what you're really working with and can prioritize the projects appropriately. The cost estimate is important not only to the department, because for our funding purposes, it's really important to the local jurisdictions because your transportation alternative projects, most of those are done through the local area program, the LAP program, where the locals actually use the funds to go build the projects. And when they get the funding and they sign the agreement for that, they're signing an agreement saying anything over this cost that we have programmed, they're going to be responsible for. And so this will help them also know that realistically they're going to be able to build what's proposed with the funding that's been allocated. Also, maximize the use of your federal planning funds. You guys, we hold you guys to the same thing that we're held to, which is utilize the funds in the year that you have them available to you. Knowing Whit and having worked with him off and on over the years, I know that not only is he going to maximize your planning funds, he's probably going to be coming to us on a regular basis. Can I have more? If somebody's not spending it, can I have some more? Because we have a lot we want to do over here. So that's a compliment, Whit. Just in case you took it any other way, that is a compliment, because I always love to see people spend what they say they're going to spend for the purposes they say they're going to spend it, and be innovative enough to be out there wanting to do more things. Coordinate with the community traffic safety teams. Each of the local jurisdictions have folks on these teams, DOTs on these teams. There's a lot of people that are really focused on the safety of our systems out there, and they know best what needs to be done with safety funds and what kind of issues there are in certain areas. And so having input from them on projects is also very important. Using department projects as an opportunity to leverage other local projects. This is something that we've been doing over the past few years more and more. If we're programming a project on Alt 19 and there's intersections that the local governments are along Alt 19 that they have in their capital improvements program to be moving forward, that's where the conversation should be starting between us and them to say, okay, so how do we save public dollars by doing the project as one, in which reduces your maintenance of traffic, reduces your fees for that, reduces your mobilization, some of those things that cost us a lot of money. If you put the projects together, you overall save public dollars, which I think is important to all of us. It also gives an opportunity to take a look at some things that maybe you didn't have in your capital improvement program, but you have dollars that you could put towards them, so we don't have to go back and impact the traveling public twice for two projects. Instead, you impact them once for a period of time, and then everybody's out of there. Check for future plan development. This is right up with Sally with the discussion on complete streets. A lot of opportunities where areas are being redeveloped and there's major planned communities, to use that opportunity to implement some of the complete streets ideas that everybody is interested in doing. I will caution you on major state facilities because our focus is on the regional movement of people and goods. The state's facilities almost always have the highest traffic counts, has your highest truck volumes, your highest speeds. Those aren't always your best facilities to do your complete streets type projects on. We'll work with you where we can. There are a couple of places around the district that we're working with the local governments on some road diets where we're taking a lane out in each direction. We're increasing the bicycle space. We're increasing the landscaping space, putting in some roundabouts, because the volume of traffic on that particular facility will allow us to do that. Our heaviest traveled facilities, that's not going to work so much. But on your lesser traveled ones, we can work on those. One of the things, and I know this is a big topic of discussion right now with transit, and specifically with the premium transit feasibility study that the department's with HART starting later this summer, and we'll definitely include the MPO and PSTA from here in Pinellas County, as well as folks from Pasco County. We got to go through the process. It's painful. I don't disagree. It is painful. It's going to be an 18 to 24 month process. But if we're out there and we're saying this is what we're going to do in the future, and we're going to use, whether I heard CSX tracks mentioned earlier, or we're going to do light rail, or we're going to do something else, if we have not fleshed that out, that is perceived as predetermination of what you're going to do, and that will jeopardize our ability to use federal funds. So please be patient as we go through this part of the process on that particular study. You guys mentioned regional earlier when I was listening to the conversation, and one of the projects, and I believe everybody here has had the presentation on it, is the Tampa Bay Express project. That is a regional project. Yes, the majority of the project is in Hillsborough County, but it is specifically designated as a regional project because one of the things we hear from Pinellas County all of the time is we can't get there from here because we have to go through Hillsborough County and use I-275 and I-4 to get there. And so the project will definitely benefit Pinellas County, whether it be your visitors coming and going from Pinellas County, your residents who may live here and work in Hillsborough, or vice versa. A lot of benefits to all of the counties in the Tampa Bay area. A couple of things of note, the Howard Franklin Bridge, as we are replacing that, the northbound span, we are strengthening the infrastructure beneath the water line so that in the future the light rail that is in your alternatives analysis and has been adopted here in Pinellas County can use that structure in the future and not have to do a lot of reconstruction that normally would have to happen. We have already committed to doing that as a part of the project, and we will do that. The other thing that we've done on I-275 from the bridge to downtown and out I-4 is we are retaining a 44-foot envelope for future transit, whether it be future premium transit, whether it be light rail coming across the bay, whether it be high-speed rail, all aboard Florida. There's different times, there's been different discussions that they'll eventually come to Tampa, or some other technology that we're not talking about. One of the things that we are talking about as we're working on the Tampa Bay Express project is how do you incorporate the technology for autonomous vehicles? Because there aren't a lot of them out there now, but 10 years from now, there's going to be a lot of them out there, and 20 years from now, most people will be driving or riding in autonomous type vehicles. And so we're trying to prepare now for whatever the infrastructure is necessary, whatever infrastructure necessary, we can incorporate that into our plans now so it doesn't take a complete retrofit and redo of any of our projects. So that's a discussion that continues to be ongoing for us. We've also, many may have already heard, we purchased our second intermodal facility site, knowing that in the future we're going to have to connect different technologies that are being used, whether it's your local bus routes, your express bus routes, your BRT, your light rail, or whatever other premium transit is identified for the region. We've got one now in downtown Tampa. We have one in the West Shore area, and there's been discussions about Gateway and the USF area as well. No sites have been identified, but we know that eventually those are the four major places that we will have to have some sort of multimodal terminal. There's no plans, just so everybody doesn't get all excited about it and think that we're doing something tomorrow. We're not. There was an opportunity to purchase the right-of-way for the preferred site for the West Shore area. If we didn't purchase it now, I really don't believe we would ever have been able to afford to purchase it in the future. We have a lease on it now. It's good for 2 years, can be renewed. One of the things we're already talking about is putting out some sort of request for proposal to the private sector to develop the site and maintain the ground levels and maybe 2 or 3 other levels for the future multimodal terminal. So a lot of opportunities, a lot of proactivity in how we fund different types of things, and look forward to working with y'all on something similar over here. See if I hit on everything. Okay, happy to open it for questions, comments, moving forward. Thanks, Whit.
Just in the interest of comment, everybody wants to ask a lot of questions. Just take a couple now, and then I've got 2 slides on case studies, which we wanted to get through, and then we'll open it up, and you'll be here for the duration.
Yes.
So we'll have more opportunities. Commissioner Moreau, did I see your hand?
Yeah, I could have brought it up under future steps. One thing that I really am concerned about is, we talked about it earlier, about communication. And the thing is, when DOT does these huge things, or whether we're doing something here in the county, the communication between the public information officers and the communications departments of the different cities should be the #1 thing, is to allow our public to know that starting next Monday, there's going to be, Elmerton Road is going to be torn up from blank to blank, or US 19, whatever. I mean, that's a regular thing in both of those examples. You know,
Hey, I-275 as well.
38th Street North or whatever, you know. But the thing is that we need a better communication with the press. You know, Channel 9 does a fantastic job in the morning to stay away from this area. I mean, you know, they're on every so many minutes. And you know not to drive on that street because you got the TV on while you're getting ready in the morning. But that's about the only channel that really does it. And I really think that if you can improve the communication with the TV stations and our own communication offices, I think that would really help the public. And, you know, you have that app, Waze, I guess now, where, you know, you can get away from going on there on that app if you have it. But you shouldn't have to do that. I mean, there should be some kind of PSA, you know, telling you on a regular basis for that week, maybe before, even a couple of days, a week. But people watch TV. That's where they're getting their news. So that's just an idea.
Good.
Commissioner Rose, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to, you mentioned something about predetermined or predestined. Can you touch fast on that? Touch a little bit back on that? I think that's really important because sometimes people get really interested and want to push it faster, which is, of course, just a natural thing. But it sounds like by doing that, you could put in jeopardy the exact item that you're trying to move ahead.
Exactly. Absolutely, and thank you for picking up on that. And I'm going to be very specific so that there's no confusion about it. There's a lot of discussion about some presentations that have been done by CSX about the CSX tracks possibly being available to be used. And everybody is diving in and saying we're going to use CSX for commuter rail in the future. That has not been determined. It has not been studied. It has not been, we have to compare it against other alternatives, and we need to make sure that everybody's on the same page. People get mad as heck at me because I keep saying premium transit. And the reason I say premium transit is because there's 8 or 9 different technologies that all fall under the premium transit, including the bus rapid transit that was talked about earlier. We don't know what the outcome of the study is going to be. So I do caution everybody, slow down, don't jeopardize the federal funding. It's 50%, sometimes more, of the overall cost of your capital portion of your project, which is critical. Thank you.
Just to sort of set up for my questions, so you'll understand where it's coming from. I kind of came here today hoping that we would all sort of move in a direction where we figure out how we work together. All of us, FDOT, MPO, PSTA, and get a real good sense of, you know, how we'll all be setting our priorities. So coming from that mode, Debbie, how do you, for the benefit at least of PSTA folks, maybe MPO folks understand, how do you work with MPO, PSTA in setting priorities? Can you just describe quickly and very high level what that process is?
The very high level, the process would be for the PSTA board to identify what their priorities are and determine what's eligible for federal funding from the Federal Highway Administration and provide those priorities to the MPO early enough to be incorporated into the overall priorities for the MPO. And that would then come to DOT as a list, 1, 2. The first priority is your congestion mitigation and what's included in that. Your second priority is, I'm just picking, don't anybody get frustrated with me, I'm just going to pick things. Your second priority is your Central Avenue BRT. Your third priority is your US 19. That way we work down that priority. Now, we may skip one of them because you're not ready for that next level of funding, but it still stays there because we know that we have more to fund on it. Does that help?
It does. And
okay.
As a follow-up question, what about when you all, as an organization, have priorities and projects that you've developed that maybe are not the same as what are on our lists, MPO and PSTA? How do we get involved in the decision-making of that, or do we get that opportunity?
Depending on what it is, you may or may not get the opportunity. The CIS projects and CIS priorities, those are for the department to make, because there's a statewide CIS funding program, and those funds are given to projects in priority order from a state perspective. And that's why sometimes we come to you and we say, okay, we've teed up for this project, need to include it in the plan. All of our projects are already in your long-range transportation plan because we've provided the bigger picture to the MPO over the years. So it may move something up, but it generally is not a project that you've never seen or heard of.
And so I ask you this question, and then I'll be done. I know you want to move on away. And I find sometimes frustrating, and maybe it's just my lack of understanding. But for instance, the Tampa Bay Express kind of came up. Our board didn't know about it, and it was including a lane, a toll lane that was to have bus service that wasn't anywhere in PSTA's realm of thinking, and which would mean that we have to adjust our funding priorities to accommodate that project, and we didn't even know it was coming. So it affects our priority list. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Then we now have a premium transit study. Again, MPO, PSTA didn't know it was coming. Most likely any of the results are going to affect our long-term plans, and so we're going to have to adjust again. I know there always has to be a chicken or an egg. What I'm trying to get at is how do we all work together in a way where, and I don't want to say caught off guard, but that we're not having to move major priorities out and adjust our funding capabilities because a project gets sort of put there and we don't even have a choice and it's not a part of any of our plans. How do we work better together is what I'm trying to say. And I don't know how to answer that.
There's two parts to answering that. The first part is there's nothing that was said or implied, and if it came across as implied, then we need to better work on our communication, that PSTA had to go put express buses out there. What was said, and I know because I've done the presentation many times personally, is that this gives an opportunity for express buses and gives an opportunity for transit to have a priority that they've never had before. So the express bus that goes from Pinellas County over to Hillsborough County will have an opportunity and be able to run without charge in the express lanes, and therefore not sitting in the congestion, which today they do.
I mean, and I understand that, but if you're going to offer that opportunity, of course, it would be silly not to take that advantage of it. But where I'm trying to get, though, is you all may be planning these things for a long time, but it just feels like they come out of nowhere. And it reverberates in the MPO and the PSTA's long-range plans. It reverberates unintended consequences, because if we have to fund a new project that wasn't planned, then something else comes out. So and you don't have to answer the question. I don't want to put you on spot. I just want to call attention to how it does affect all of us. And we need to find a better way of having all our priorities together, because I think your priorities are important, and they're all good projects that you're doing. It's how do we better communicate or better make those decisions so we're not getting caught off guard. And that's it.
You answered your own question.
Communication.
That's on all of us.
Right.
Those projects have been in the interstate master plan for decades.
Yep.
But you all have turnover. We don't necessarily have turnover. We need to do a better job collectively of just informing you that these things are coming down the pike. There are some things that are new, but most of the concepts have been in a plan somewhere, and we just need to remind you of that.
Well, and I can tell you, I don't know that we haven't had any of those things at PSTA level in our forefront.
Sure, we can do a better job of that. Commissioner Welch, and then I'd like to get to our best practices, and then we can open it up for more focused dialogue.
Mine will be quick because I won't say that, but I've been on the board for a really long time, and that was a question that I had. But coming from the other side, it will all come down to funding. But and thank you for being here and for the partnership, one of the issues that PSTA had, and we saw that though, was that the express lane stopped at Gateway and did not come down to St. Pete. And it's my understanding that you are now looking at extending that down to St. Pete. I just wanted to confirm that.
The lane southbound extends down to Gandy, and the lane northbound picks up north of Gandy. Right now, it does not go to St. Pete yet.
Are you reviewing that? Because that was a specific ask from PSTA.
And MPO.
And from MPO.
Both.
Okay.
And from the city of St. Pete. You guys have all asked, but I'm going to tell you, this was one of those situations where when you look at the overall master plan and you look at the pure volumes in the area, at the time that the volumes get to where they're at a certain level, then yes, we will add it to the master plan. They're just not there yet.
Well, just speaking to that remains a concern that we're not connecting major activity in St. Petersburg with Gateway. And for us to have express services meaningful, I think that has to be a part of it. And I thought you were now looking at that.
We're looking at buses on shoulders, which is a different option than express lanes.
So you're looking at shoulder.
Yes.
That's between St. Pete and Gateway.
Absolutely.
And that is.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Why are you
it gives.
Why are you calling that something different than TBX?
Because TBX, the Tampa Bay Express lanes, can be used by any passenger vehicle, including buses.
Okay.
The shoulders can only be used by transit. That would be the proposal. That gives, when congestion hits a certain level and your travel speed on the interstate gets, I want to say 35, I might be wrong, somewhere in the 35 range, then buses can move to the shoulder and travel where everybody else has to sit there.
Can you give us a link to that information, whether it's something that describes that?
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening.
No offense,
You're welcome.
But even 45 is too slow on the expressway. I just throw that out.
Let me go through, if I can, Mayor Bradbury, and just get to the best practices, and we'll come back to you. Debbie will be here. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Third time's the charm. Okay, what we wanted to do was also just bring some best practices from around the country. And I want to say, first of all, we have 27 MPOs in Florida, and they all do this a little bit differently. We have over 40 MPOs in the U.S., and they all do this differently when it comes to setting priorities. We have 7 DOT districts, and they do things a little bit differently in the state of Florida. So there's no one-size-fits-all. There's no perfect right approach. There's no silver bullet approach. It has to work for us locally as partners. but there are some parameters to setting priorities. There's been a lot of talk about Metro Plan Orlando, and you all have this in your handout. Maybe you can see it better. Metro Plan Orlando is the region I came from. It's got some warts. It's not all perfect. Osceola County has theoretically or periodically threatened to get out of Metro Plan and form their own MPO. Seminole County threatened the same thing. But they work well as a region. And they work well as a region because it's one MPO covering 3 counties, and their transit provider, one of the largest in the country in terms of area, also covers 3 counties, links. They are currently updating their priority process, but I want to draw your attention to what they have identified as evaluation criteria and performance measures. And they're not dissimilar, really, from ours, but if you look at the blue box on the lower right, they look at transit system access, transit access to employment, access to intermodal stations, access to activity centers, access to international airports as part of their evaluation for an integrated regional transportation system. They identify their surface transportation program funding priorities at the very outset of their prioritization process. In other words, their board gets together and says, for highway, transportation management and operations, bike and pedestrian, transit, what do we want to allocate to those areas in for the 5th year in our priority list when we start to move things into the work program or into the transportation improvement program. And before they even ask for projects, they tell local governments, we're going to put a proportionately more share of dollars into bike ped this year, or into safety this year, or into transit this year. So there's a heads up to those local governments that they can come forward. A little bit different than what Debbie mentioned that we need to be doing here, and they found some trouble with doing that, but they, for each of those 4 topic areas, highways, TSM&O, bike ped, and transit, they prioritize within each one. And the way they characterize that is, it's sort of like the dog show. There's a best in breed, and then there's best overall. So you kind of know what are your best transit projects, what are your best highway projects, what are your best bike ped projects, and you do rank those. That's how MetroPlan works. And they found a lot of difficulty in coming up with a mode-neutral prioritization process, because how do you compare a 200-yard sidewalk against a major regional project? There are some ways, and there are some MPOs around the country that do that, but MetroPlan has chosen not to. But they take that, and then they move it into one set of regional priorities. So there's a 2-tiered process, and I think we could follow something somewhat similar to that. This is really interesting. I don't know how well you can see it, but I will highlight for you. On the chart, MetroPlan keeps track every year of how they've allocated their discretionary dollars, their surface transportation dollars. And again, they're not allocating strategic intermodal system dollars. That's the DOT's responsibility. But it's those flexible discretionary dollars that MPOs have responsibility for. In 1992, they put 70% of those dollars to highway capacity projects. And they put about 10% to bike ped and 20% to transit. Now go down the list, and you can see every year that increment gets a little different, and it starts to come into a little more balance to where today, in 2015 or last year, it was, if I can read this right, and I left my glasses at home, it's 32% for highway, 17% for bike ped, 30% for transit, and 21% for management and operations. And then road rangers, they used to fund the road ranger service, and that's now being picked up as part of the Ultimate I-4, which is a public-private partnership. So the private entity that's building that project is now handling the road rangers. So you can see the evolution. And what that allows them to do every year is look at what are the initiatives, what are the trends. Sunrail came online in 2014, and that affected some of these priorities. It also prompted the need for Links and MPO and FDOT District 5 to meet on that 2-week basis to have that coordination and that communication. The other thing that they do here is the priority list is reassessed every year. So while they do keep projects in the priority list, certainly if they have prior funding, they keep them and they move them forward. But projects that have not been funded are at risk of dropping out of their priority list every year if they're not rolling into that 5th-year project. And that's not something that we've done. We have an amazing level of continuity, which is good. in our priority program list, but we don't really go back. And this is really evident on our transportation alternatives list for our bike and ped projects, where they can be there for ages. We just got the Bel Air, the West Bay beacon, the crosswalk, implemented, not with federal or state dollars, but with local dollars. But that had been on our TA list for how many years? 9 years? 8 years? It had been on there for a long time. And so those kinds of things, if they're not moving forward, they do reassess. Project readiness, as Debbie mentioned, is a significant factor, and that's something we need to step up our efforts. So projects that are prioritized need to be ready. I'll just reinforce that. And projects stay on the list until they are fully funded. And again, I can't emphasize enough that coordination that they're doing. So just that level of conversation. And even if we say, look, we still want to keep 80, 90, 100% of our flexible dollars on highway projects to make sure they get done and advance those projects, at least have that conversation. And I think that's an important thing that was a takeaway from Metro Plan. The next one I want to highlight is Austin, Texas. And I'm real familiar with Austin because when I was doing the downtown Orlando master plan a couple of years ago, last year really, they wanted to be the Austin of Florida. They wanted to be the Austin of South. So Austin has a lot going on in terms of cultural identity. That MPO is one of the most congested regions in the country, by the way. And they open up their call for projects every few years, not every year. And that gives them the opportunity to move things forward. And they also identify the anticipated funding for 5 years. They do some set-asides, and they establish some targets whenever they do those call for projects. One of the things that I thought was really good that they do is that, and like we do here now at the TMA leadership group, they separate regional and local priorities. And so we're doing that. That's reinforcing. For their long-range transportation-based set-asides, they have made the decision to allocate 50% of their surface transportation dollars into projects that are either within or connecting activity centers, connecting multiple activity centers. And they took 50% of their dollars in 2015 going forward and put those on projects that serve those activity centers. That's the kind of policy leadership that we as staff need from you all. And I think that helps us work with DOT to say our board's taking this position. How do we identify projects that do that? How do we move projects forward? And we can then educate and inform our local government partners to sign up to that as well. And that reinforces our Pinellas Planning Council land use expectations. So it all needs to kind of line up. The other thing they did is for their bike and ped projects, they put 15% towards that. And that includes capital plans, programs, and studies. So I think that was important. And then if you just look at the chart, that's just an example of how at the top they've set criteria for regional projects, and at the bottom they've set criteria for local projects. And you can see they talk about on regional projects for public transportation, rail transit lines and facilities, fixed guideway, bus rapid transit, express bus, transit centers, and park and ride facilities. So that's the definition of what they're saying are regional transit, public transportation projects. And then, again, just to kind of show the weights that they come up with, again, it's a complex table, but what you see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are the categories of projects, everything from, or how they evaluate them, evaluation criteria. So environmental justice, which is, are we serving disadvantaged communities? Are the benefits and burdens appropriate? System preservation is the maintenance aspect, fix it first. You see freight mobility. And what they take a workshop with their board through is they ask them to weight each one of these. And so you can see, for example, congestion, current congestion got a weight of 3, and compared to crash frequency got a 3, strategic highway safety got a 2. And that rolls forward into the total available points. And you can see their scoring system. So it's a clear application and process that reflects the MPO's goals and allows time for the project to progress between project cycles. And I think there's a lot to take away from this. We were doing a lot of ahas and when we were listening to them on the phone. So I wanted to just present those options. And now we're going to stop with the death by PowerPoint and just open it up for any questions and a discussion. And I guess I just want to turn it back to the questions that I gave each of you all. And maybe just the first question is, just to start, we can go anywhere, and I promise Mayor Bradbury will go to you first. How can Pinellas County communities, employers, and taxpayers benefit from PSTA? And the corollary to that, what are the most critical unmet needs of PSTA's ridership community? And then what does PSTA need from the MPO and PPC for that? So you can go down this list and ask your questions, but I thought this was helpful in the very last one. Cassandra and I put these questions together. What kind of a process would you like to see for setting annual or short-term priorities for transportation funding? And that's the reason we're here today. So if you don't get a full answer to this, to all these questions, but you want to write some things down and turn them into me with your initials, as staff, we'll get together and we'll provide some answers to you, or we'll make this a follow-up presentation at your board meetings or at a workshop in the future. Mayor Bradbury.
I can answer both of those. For FDOT, I've noticed in my travels that there's a lot of the metropolitan areas up north that use their access shoulders during rush hour. Not just for buses, but to allow motor vehicles to be on those so that they're not all traveling at 35 miles an hour. Maybe they're traveling at 45 or 50 miles an hour just to get they know between 3:30 and 6 o'clock that shoulder needs to be open for people to go back to their homes or what have you. Why aren't we doing that here throughout Florida?
That's a great question. And for years we've built the system, and the shoulder widths, the depth of the apron knee, and your widths at all the bridges that are along the system are not wide enough to do that speed. We did an analysis to see what it would take to be able to do that.
And the reason why is I understand the pavement depth and everything, but a lot of times the people that are going to move over into those are the ones that are going to get off at that exit before you get to the bridge. And they've added little smaller, less depth concrete breakdown areas as well, and which helps too if it's a vehicle that's bigger, like an 18-wheeler or something like that, during normal driving.
What I can take a look at specific to exit rates throughout the it's the longer distance ones that concerns us as people try to do, because at your bridges, they are, and it's not safe to do that. But we'll go back to the
Well, there's a really great best practice out there, which is Minnesota DOT and St. Paul, the Twin Cities area, where they created this thing called Team Transit, which was the Minnesota DOT, the transit provider for the Twin Cities area, and the MPO, which is one of the best MPOs in the country. And they worked on how to get that shoulder bus operation and high-occupancy vehicles throughout the region. And it was a concerted effort that's been in place over, I want to say about 15, 20 years. But that is the collaborative partnership, that Team Transit initiative. That was one of the best practices we found when I was doing some research. Commissioner Mertz.
Yes, thank you. One, I just want to say thank you very much. I find the PSTA presentation particularly interesting. So it's been a year since I've been on PSTA, so I can see where things have moved since then. That's been very interesting. It also then provided me some additional input in my role with the MPO and the UBC. One thing, I'm trying to target your first two. One item that I saw during your early on presentation that I think fits with 1 and 2 is the strengthening of transit facility transfer points to the hubs. To me, there are many, many things that were brought up today. Some are technology-driven, some are infrastructure-driven, but the bottom line is you're going to want to have ridership. And the more ridership you have, that's going to show, stability, the numbers are going to be there, fares are going to be there, impetus to continue to grow. And to me, if you don't feel safe in where you get on the bus or get off the bus, that will limit perhaps some people's interest in getting on the bus, riding the bus. So to me, the discussions that you made, if perhaps some of them are shoehorned in, and the reality of what they are, because it's grown. right? So now as a unified organization, we're looking at planning options as well as transportation options. The strengthening of these transfer points, to making them more uniform, perhaps to making them more safe, if that's the right term. Not that they weren't safe before, but just so safer. So the perception is I may get on the bus here, I may have kids that are coming on from school districts, which is great. They're going to get dropped off at some existing location. Make sure that that whole thing is from a parent point of view, from an overall safety point of view. I think if that elevates, makes people comfortable, they'll want to ride more. And then I think that also helps in the overall numbers and everything else. So from a collaborative arrangement from MPO PPC and PSTA, to me, we have on the MPO PPC discussions on zoning and change and various things. To me, that is an obligation and an opportunity to try to work together on this.
Well, and exactly, and that's where we can work with local government partners, county, cities, to give incentives to the development community to make sure that that happens, and that the development community is not thinking about transit as an afterthought or putting it, away or not really giving it good attention. But if the development community emphasizes transit access to their property, then they might get a density bonus. They might get a reduction in impact fees. They may, there's something that we can work with, and each local government will be a little bit different approach. But I think you've touched on a really important long-term issue because land use change takes time. Let me go to Jordan.
As we're talking about the first question, how can us county communities approach the PSTA, kind of searching on some laws and some different things that happen in other states, other cities, around our country, and in other countries. One of the things that interests me is that mayors in China decided to all get together and have mayor ride-in. So, in other words, you've got buy-in from your electeds, or you buy-in from your larger corporations like Jabil, Tech Data, HSN, some of those business leaders, Raymond James and so forth, USM, the medical industry. If we can start getting some of those folks to start riding some of the bus routes, perhaps maybe it will start a trend in the homes and in the communities to start getting people. That's what I'm finding. I don't think we have a blog page yet at the PSTA, but maybe we need a blog page. And maybe we should have Peter Schwartz start doing a blog.
Well, we're both revamping our websites, and there's going to be video components of that, and Brad's already started that. We're going to do that. We'll gladly take video of any of you riding. Yes.
So if we could, wait. But you guys have the infrastructure to do it.
Well, I think we do. I've been here since the 70s. I do think we do. So if I go riding on the buses, because my family, they're like, no, nobody rides buses. If I want to change that in my house. So if I go start riding down to St. Pete to visit Garden Commissioner Kennedy, then I need to make sure there's a video of me doing that. So we can get the word out. Or if I get a leader from Honeywell or from the airport, or from let's say we get Vinnick over here and we have them ride our buses and we need a video. Okay, good. We'll all do that.
Well, one of the hindrances to Jolene's idea possibly is the fact that it's very difficult to plan to take a bus from North County to downtown St. Pete because it'll take you 2 hours to get there.
Well, I just showed Patty, and she can attest to this. I just put it, and I know it's going to improve PSTA. I'm not picking on you or tapping you, but I went on to PSTA's website. You can log in your home address and Clear City Airport or TIA line, you can both, or even the port, and it takes you 3 hours and 30 minutes from downtown Fort to those locations. But it's not because, it's because of the route. Because you have to go all the way to Oldsmar and then come back down to Tampa. We went over the causeway, and I know we're working on it. So
but that's what I was saying.
That's
what I was saying. We have to have the infrastructure. We actually have to have better connecting service. That's what I meant by what I was saying by the infrastructure. I'm with you. That's
Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you. There was one thing that I should have been, by today, able to say easily because Brett had to remind me about 400 times. Of those 2.6 transportation disadvantage rides that we did, $11 ones, those cost PSTA $70 each trip. So I want you to know that we're doing as good as we can with what we've got. We have a long way to go, and those are our transportation disadvantaged folks in all of Pinellas County.
That's a huge budget impact, you're right.
It's huge.
Yeah, so the more of those folks that can shift into the regular fixed route and pay $2.25 or reduced fare, then that's going to save a lot of money to do other things. That's the important takeaway there. Well, again, I also want to get you all focused a little bit on what kind of process would you like to see for better collaboration, and as specific as you can get in terms of every year we want to do this, or are we considering these factors? That would help. Yeah?
And that's kind of what I was just going to talk about. I don't exactly know what the process should be. I just, Darnie mentioned, what are the outcomes that we come away from today? And just for me personally, and I hope by mentioning it, it sparks some dialogue, is we do need a process. What I mentioned with the FDOT, how it affects us when changes happen. I feel like at least annually, there needs to be some type of evaluation of all of the organizations that are in the room and their goals. How that happens, and I'm not going to say, but we need to understand FDOT's goals. We need to understand MPO's goals. We need to understand PSTA's goals. And frankly, I heard earlier that the county's road projects are done separately from ours, or reviewed separately and even in a different way. I think that has to be included in the mix as well, because we're all talking transportation, and my God, county roads impact our residents. So including them in the dialogue, even if they're not coming from a different funding category, I think would be really important to our residents. Somehow we all have to be at the table at least once a year talking about what our priorities, and then agreeing what those should be, so that in the middle of the year there's not some surprise project. And by doing that, I think we're all connected. We all understand what each other's issues, shortfalls, wins are, and that's really important because we're really all going for the same goal. It's all transportation. I see MPO really as the planning agency. As you mentioned, we have implementers. County is an implementer. PSTA is an implementer. Our cities are an implementer. And there just needs to be a better connection. And from the MPO side, I mean, I'm the PSTA person that then represents PSTA to MPO. But from the MPO, or the PSTA side, what I've felt being on MPO is that I think it's getting better, but I don't feel that transit, and I use the word transit in regards to buses or anything premium like that, is really, when we're looking at our list of priorities, it's just never really talked about a lot. And it's not a part of the priority process. And as you just showed some of the case studies and how the funding was allocated, someday my hope would be that transit, whatever that is just as easily rolling off of our tongue as we got to have bike lanes on this road. That's a priority. Or we've got to have improved sidewalks here. Transit's got to be in the same mind frame.
Let's get some other thoughts on it.
One of the things that I have trouble, or I keep back to green light on is we didn't personalize this. And just for an example, 4 names, Tina, Andy, Jan, and Barry. They all arrived at 444 in Canals Park. I met them when I wrote it. 4 other names, Karen, Frank, John, and Mark, all business property owners that have some impact on and benefit from transit. And how do we make these decisions more personal to people and help people understand that? I think it's a big way that our strategic communications plan, going down the Central Grand Avenue today, but for the MPO process seems so impersonal as we've discussed, and maybe I'm the only one that feels this way.
No, it's storytelling, and I think telling the story, one of the things that I think I've heard from many, there's 1,000 theories of Greenlight and why it wasn't successful, but consistently, folks said we weren't talking enough about the community. It became a conversation about PSTA. It became a conversation about the agency and the bus operator who made you mad one day. It needs to be about the community. And so I think your point is well taken. If we're having a conversation about people who are using transportation, then we'll make that happen. Our staff has been working on street profiles for our blog, and we did one for 4th Avenue South. We're doing another one for Corder and Seminole, the city of Seminole. And I've asked our staff, go out and talk to the business owners, get a quote, personalize it, get that quote in the very lead sentence of that story. Don't make it about the data and something impersonal. Make it about the people who are depending on that transportation facility or network. And I think the more conversations we can have along those lines, the better we'll be in having a conversation about the needs and how we want to fund them.
Thanks, Lynn. So to hark back to an earlier slide, there were conservative estimates that we want to see this area has the capacity to grow 50,000 jobs. And of course, we want to take care of the businesses we have here now. But we know a few things. We know that in order to either have this area be have the right climate to grow businesses or to bring businesses here, we know that they're looking for a lot of things. They're looking at the quality of public education. They're looking at the readiness and the talent of our workforce, and of course they're looking at mass transit. One of our speakers at a regional planning council meeting a few months ago said something I thought was insightful. He said corporations won't refuse to relocate here because we lack one mode. They're not going to come here because we don't have light rail. They won't come here because we don't have a strong plan, or we're not communicating our plan. So for me, and I don't want to veer the conversation in this direction necessarily, because it's a little bit of a philosophical question, but for me, I suspect that the real catalyst for change is going to come from the community and empowering those community groups to help give us the answers, and us as elected official and transit representatives give us the framework for that plan, so then we can, hand that off to our staff, the unsung heroes. You guys get better leadership direction from us, so that I think, kind of speaking to Mayor Bajowski's kind of frustration, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, I think part of the frustration is we feel like maybe we're reacting to something new that FDOT throws our way, whether it's the Tampa Bay Express or the CXS lines. And I think what we all want here is to be able to have like our own strong plan in place that's crystal clear, so it doesn't feel like we're always kind of getting knocked back on our heels with these other ideas from top-down agencies.
I agree with that.
That's something just on what you just said about the community engaging, the community discussion. It's almost like when you were talking about the priorities, are we going to look at them annually, and what's that process? I was thinking when you said that, it's almost like if you were just strictly talking roads, and you've had these things on the list for 9 years, wouldn't it be interesting to throw those lists of roads to the community in a community workshop and say, come tell us what your priority, what's affecting your life today,
And I bet you we might hear something different.
Well, we do that for our long-range plan, so I don't want to minimize the work that our staff has done.
No.
And PSTA staff has done, but I think your point's well taken, is framing it in a way that doesn't undermine projects that are in the work program, that are moving forward, but for those that might have the opportunity to move in. And for example, I'll just throw something out there real quick. PSTA staff and our staff have met a few times, and we've talked a little bit about, we have a great short-term plan, and through our various plans, we have a great long-range set of projects that we think we'd like to do by 2040 or something like that. But the mid-range, that sort of how we get there, is not well defined. So we talked about maybe looking at you all at your December 4th work session, PPC MPO, said east-west transportation is underemphasized. We really need to take a look at east-west transportation. Well, we've had a conversation about West Bay, East Bay Drive, Roosevelt. You know, that corridor, because it connects all the way out to the beach. Is that corridor something that we want to begin looking at now at a planning level, a more detailed planning level, so that in 5 or 10 years we can have a conversation with DOT about how do we fit that in? How do we begin moving that thing forward? We got to start somewhere. And I think maybe looking at, that's why the beach access, the US 19 and the gateway areas are starting to lay that foundation for those kinds of conversations. Councilmember Kennedy.
And following up on the transit and the citizens, I think part of what we really have to do is prove to the citizens that this is a service that they would actually want to use. And I think that's where we get to a loggerhead of going, well, that's nice, but if it's going to take 2 hours to go from here to there, it's just not a choice. But, and looking at it from St. Pete point of view, I think PSTA is working from the point of view of the downtown going from a hub to a grid. That may get people to say, hey, I can actually walk out my door, get on the bus, use it and like it, and then talk to their neighbor or their coworker about it. Same with the Central Avenue BRT. It's a, what was the terminology that was up there as to a pilot project? And in my mind, as the pilot scenario, it's a place where citizens can then say, this works. I'm not on the Central Avenue trolley where it's taking me an hour and a half to go from downtown to the beach. I'm on this, and I've done this in an amount of time that is close to what I would have done in a car, with the convenience of not having to park it and not having the expense of it. So I think we need to take those little steps, and then we need to be there waving the flag as to, this is PSTA doing this is MPO doing this is us going forward, and just getting into the mind frame that this is actually something that people want, as opposed to feeling that it's something that is being imposed on people, or something that's only there for those who are unfortunate enough to have to use it as their only mode of transportation. How we do that whole mind shift is a step-by-step process, but to me, what we're doing downtown and what we're doing on Central Avenue is the start of that process.
I think we have an opportunity in Clearwater to do another one too. So, I mean, show it throughout the county where we can. Were there comments on this side and on this?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm going to get you for that Florida comment too. But I think this is a great start, this kind of meeting, I think, Brad, with putting this together between the two bodies. Because we do have mutual interests, but we also have separate missions and focuses. Quickly, on the green light issue, I think we need to move beyond that and stop beating ourselves up for it. A 24-point loss at the polls is a combination of things. What wasn't just the messaging, it wasn't the rail, it wasn't the fact that it didn't go to North County. It wasn't just the fact that many folks aren't over the recession and still aren't today. And it wasn't just the DHS issue, it was all of those things combined. And remember, Hernando and Polk had ballot initiatives that didn't include rail, and they lost by more than green light lost. It just was not the right time for that. To me, and Doreen hit on this, we've got to put the service on the ground. It's really a catch-22. My niece worked over the summer. She lives in South St. Pete. Worked here in the what do we call this area? No, it's Icon. Okay. Hour and a half to get here on the bus. Hour and a half to get home every day. 3 hours. Takes less. Yeah. And so that kind of service is not going to get choice riders. And so how do we get that service on the ground? Maybe we use demonstration project. I don't know if that's a better word than pilot, but you've got to prove that transit will work in some mode in Pinellas County. One thing I want to mention is a lot of our riders don't have a choice. If you look at our community bus plan, more than half of our riders don't have a car or even a driver's license, yet most of them have a full or part-time job. This is their way to get to work, and we have to focus on that. When we try to streamline as we did this year, we were able to cut about half of the routes that staff suggested, and the reason we didn't is because we didn't have alternatives for folks. Either they had to walk down 62nd Avenue, maybe Bradbury that doesn't even have sidewalks, or there was no other alternative. So it's really a catch-22. And PSTA has always said we can't abandon those core riders who depend on this every day to get to work. So all that comes back down to funding at the end of the day. We can only cut so much. We've got some capacity that we didn't use this year with our own members, but at the end of the day, to get the kind of service on the ground that we really PSTA is going to need some assistance, whether it's from MPO or county or some other form. If you look at our budget, you just can't get there from there to put that kind of service on the ground, or even meet our capital needs over the next 5-7 years without some kind of partnership and funding from some source. So I think this is a great start.
Right back to you. I think Commissioner Edwards.
Yeah, just real quickly. I mean, I think that we've talked about being somewhat frustrated maybe by some communication from some organizations who are different groups. Can you only imagine what the residents feel about the frustrations they have with groups like us, groups like that don't have a real, they don't get a real chance to talk about what you just said about being able to do that, the frustrations that they feel about these, they're just some obvious things. And so that kind of gets back to making some of those pilot projects that we can test out and see if it's working, to get some of those frustrations that residents have, because it's simply about the people who have to use it. We're talking about building a transit system that people want to use, and that we'll never get there if we're not going to really listen to what's going on. I mean, there's some obvious things from a long-term perspective, connection to the beach and such things. But I think in the short term, as we build and we start crawling, and walking and then running and then throughout the process, I think it's really important that we identify some of those things and set up mechanisms somehow where we actually are reaching out to different geographic and demographic sets of people to listen to. What are they doing? And to be able to report back that, the young people in North County, gosh, this is what they're looking for. It's so obvious. And then the folks that really, so there's some real things I think we can be doing that are kind of parallel. But I think that we create a lot of frustration with our residents. And I just think listening a little bit more and having a connection would be important. So,
Only go to Commissioner Longman. You'll be the last word, if I can.
Okay. I was just remembering a conversation that I had with Catherine Eden from Park, and I'm wondering if there's ever been an analysis of what it would take in terms of funding if we had a smaller type of vehicle that could run those really those routes where people really need to get back and forth to work, and run them every 15 minutes. Do we have any idea what that might cost?
I'm sure PSTA does. That's always been a discussion of small vehicles. An operator is the same cost regardless of the size of the vehicle, and that's, about 8% of the cost? So the guy sitting in the seat that was really the big cost.
Thank you. I'm going to put this out there because I have some 5 recently graduated college family members.
We're fortunate that they're out.
They live either in St. Pete or they work in Clearwater, or they live in Clearwater or in Tampa. Vice versa, all over. So, as an elected official in the city of Clearwater, and now running another term, I feel like this is a green light. And I know all of us in this room know what we did or did not do. So for us to continue to talk about that's the past. This is now moving to the future. Now we need to figure out, okay, how can we get people engaged in the riding? How do we get it to be a cool idea? So I'm going to put my name in the hat to say if PSTA wants me to ride with USF students, ride with the medical groups, whether it's all children, daycare, whatever, ride with Honeywell, Lockheed Martin, Tech Data, and leaders of those businesses and those big groups, I would be happy to. And I think that there's a lot of people in this room who do the same thing. So that we can start changing the message to that riding PSTA buses is safer. You can get on your Wi-Fi. We hopefully at some point in time can think it's really cool, because I know that California, Boston, New York, Chicago, they do a lot of research on this. They all are starting to put little coffee cafe, little bar with a little cookie and coffee, so you can have your espresso. Young people like that. So, and the dogs can ride the bus. And then we have. Well, I mean, the point is that there's a new generation type of interest, and I think that we need to stop thinking about how we're antiquated and start thinking about how excited we all are in this room. And Commissioner Welch, thank you for going out and reporting me on as it relates to this. We are excited to start with a new way of thinking about bus ridership and transit and all modes. We need help with the trail voice. We need to make sure our trail is a regional rollout of bike share. We need to make sure that we are putting Wi-Fi and lighting and truck rallies and events on our trail throughout the entire region. These are some really neat things, but we've got to go, all right, let's do this all together.
Mr. Phil, did you have a question or comment?
I have a comment. Really good discussion today. I guess one thing that I don't think is, other than being implemented, one of the most exciting pieces of region is how you're great. So if we were to just implement that plan, how much would that cost? And so that's a question. But then what's already been said today is really a good idea. We're listening to it. We should be getting on the buses and asking the riders. We should be going to the schools and talking to the kids. We need to go to unusual places that we haven't gone before and listen, not tell them. Like when we went to Green Light, we were telling them. We weren't really having that dialogue and so on and so forth. So, and I like the idea of the demonstration project, but let's take it fast. Let's not wait 5 years to do a demonstration.
I want to say something real quick. I know it's noon and we want to get you out of here. Maybe probably at lunch point. The coolest idea that I've seen in public involvement in transit, Indian Nation Council of Governments in Tulsa, Oklahoma, retrofitted a bus that they acquired from a private sector. It wasn't the transit provider. They cleaned out the bus and they put in a coffee bar. They put in a place to show videos. They put in maps, and they took that bus around the community and invited people into the bus to talk about transportation. And it was such a cool thing. I don't know if y'all were familiar with that, but I was so impressed. And I was out in Kansas City and saw their presentation. And they did that with sweat equity. I mean, the staff, and I'm sure Robbie went, but I can get you to do that, right? They went in there and they ripped out the seats. They put up all that equipment. But what a great tool to go around and invite people in and tell them and ask them, what do you want? What do you want to see? And if we can do something, that's the innovative, out-of-the-box ideas. I'm sure we could figure out a way to do something similar or even better. But that's the kind of energy and ideas that I think we get from getting you all together in a room. Councilmember Kennedy or Councilmember Rice, do either of you want to have a final word and close this out?
Well, I'd like to just, say thank you for attending. And I know from the MPO PPC scenario, we look forward to having continued dialogue, and
We should do this again, Mr. Chairman. Not in a year.
Right, 6 months.
8 months.
6 months. Yeah.
6 to 8 months somewhere.
And I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding to that suggestion, so that may be something we charge Rick and Brad with as to timing and agenda and where we go from here. But gotta start somewhere. So.
Well said. This was enormously beneficial. I was looking forward to it, and I think meeting again in 6 months is a great idea. And Whit, Brad, thank you very much, and thank you to our MPO and PSTA staff that are here.
And FDOT.
And FDOT, yes, and RPC. This sheet with questions was enormously helpful. So as you get these turned in, I would love to see the results. You don't have to put initials by them for me, but I would really love to see the feedback from other people and what their takes were from these questions.
Very good. So yes, if you just put down any notes whatsoever, right, Chelsea? Turn it into me and make sure you have your initial, and then we'll make sure we're compliant with all public records. Thank you all very much for being here. We scratched the surface, so just kind of keep that in mind, and we'll keep going.
Well done, sir.
Thank you. Really nice to meet you.
Thank you, ladies. Appreciate it.
Yep.